Okay, darlings, listen, we're going to be using, I absolutely love this saying of Rinpoche's. It's so miraculous. It's so amazing. We can mold our mind into any shape we like. I mean, we all know this. If we're sort of even vaguely Buddhist, we kind of know this. So we're going to really just, again, repeat until the penny drops and we have confidence that this is what we can do. You know, this is the job of being a Buddhist, basically. So we're going to spend a bit of time today, as much as you can, listening, thinking, analyzing these concepts, you know, drilling down on these concepts, looking at them from different points of view, try to get it clear in our stubborn minds, you know. So we just think we're going to do a little refuge prayer there, Anna, perhaps. Okay, good. All right. Good. So we just think we're going to sit here together, listen, think about, analyze, contemplate, and kind of listen as if it's the first time. That's really helpful, as if it's the first time. Listen to it freshly so that we can, as it says here, we're going to rely upon, until we're enlightened, I'm going to say it first in English, until we are enlightened, we are going to rely upon the Buddha, his teachings, and then the community of practitioners, our fellow practitioners. And so by the virtuous karmic seeds we plant in our mind, from listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha, no matter how long it takes, so that then we're qualified to be a benefit to all suffering sentient beings, because we're all in the same boat. Sangye chodang soke chodam la janchu baru dagni kyapsu chi dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupha shog sangye chodang soke chodam la janchu baru dagni kyapsu chi dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupha shog. All right. I remember reading His Holiness when I was editing Lama Yeshe's book on Mahamudra, which is all about literally comprehending the conventional and then the ultimate nature of our mind. It's all about the mind. His Holiness is saying that it's easier to talk about the mind. We can do that, and Buddhist teachings are amazing, amazing, amazing. The detail, the clarity, the precision about what the mind is just marvelous to study, you know. But as he says, it's extremely difficult to have an experience of your mind. I mean, we can see that we have concepts. So if we're a materialist, if we say a neuroscientist, when we say mind, we literally visualize those parts of the brain. That's how we think about it, isn't it? Which is not wrong. I mean, the way I put it, without insulting neuroscientists, is that what goes on in the brain is a really accurate indicator of what's going on in the mind, because they're not the same. For the Buddha, very clear. But to actually experience our mind, and that's really exactly what Mahamudra is all about. First, the conventional nature, which is subtle enough, that we don't even get. But then eventually, of course, the emptiness of the mind, which is its ultimate nature. I mean, all we can do is start, isn't it? All we can do is start. So this idea that we can change our mind, mold our mind to any shape we like, is really simple. And not conceptually, it's not complicated. But because it's so utterly and completely and profoundly, totally different from the way we think, certainly in the materialist world, but also the way we have been thinking for, Buddha would say, for countless eons, it's incredibly difficult. Technically speaking, it's really easy to think one thought and then change it to another thought. We do this all the time, you know, but so we have to look at why it is. Why is it we find it tremendously hard? And why is it, first of all, that we don't even realize that's the job we're supposed to do? I mean, there are so many things conspiring against us doing this deceptively simple job. Stop believing, stop the negative thoughts and start having the positive thoughts, because that's the bottom line. Finally, a Buddha is a person who has completely rid from their mind any atom of any thought that isn't in sync with reality. That's really a simple way of putting it. And whose mind is completely in sync with reality, has a mind that's completely pervaded by wisdom and virtue, because they are our true nature, speaking even conventionally. This is what Buddha is saying. So these words are not complicated, but why we need to look at why is it so hard for us to mold our mind into the shape of a virtuous, wise person? Well, so there are things conspiring, aren't there? and their habits, mainly their habits, and then even the fact that we live in a world that reinforces those habits, because, and that's not it's not being critical. I mean, philosophical materialism is indeed a philosophical view of the universe, and it's one that says it's material. I mean, that's been around for centuries. We didn't invent it in science. It's been around, I mean, at the time of the Buddha, before that, in the Hindus, there were all these kinds of views that were prevailing at the time, and one indeed was the view of materialism. It's one of the views the Buddha argued with. So because we're living in a world, this is one of the major obstacles, because we're living in a world that reflects that view back to us, it reinforces the view of ego, which is that, you know, I'm set in stone. No one needs to tell us that. We believe it, you know, we believe it utterly and completely. So whatever is prevalent in our mind, we believe that's who we are, isn't it? Or people's view of us, we believe that's true. So that's the major one of the major obstacles that conspires against us doing this job of even having confidence that we can mold our mind into the shape of a virtuous, wise person by changing the concepts is you know, first of all, the one that's reinforced every day is the view that I am physical. That is it. There is only the physical, that mummy and daddy made me. They gave me the DNA and the genes and the chemicals, you know, starting with the egg and the sperm, and that's who I am. So that's a very strong philosophical view we have, and that is reinforced by all our psychological views and our neuroscientific views. And this is not criticizing them, it's just pointing it out. Buddha's not arguing that the external world doesn't play a role. He's not saying we're not existing in dependence upon events and circumstances and eggs and sperms. He's not arguing with that. All he's suggesting is we give too much power to that, and we're not emphasizing the main point, which is the mind. So that's a very major obstacle. So the first instinct of ego when something goes wrong is we have to point somewhere, don't we? Where's the problem? And it's usually out there, because out there is the world, isn't it? Out there is the world for us. And we're this isolated, separate little person plonked on this planet, unbeknownst to us. I mean, you know, no one consulted me and said, may I make you, Robina, and plonk you on this planet. We sort of feel we're either made by a creator or made by mummy and daddy and plonked on this planet. That's how we feel. We don't say those words precisely, but that's the feeling of ego, this innocent victim who didn't ask to get born. I mean, we can see this is primordial. So it doesn't even occur to us when things go wrong that we should change our mind. That almost sounds silly, you know. Why? Because the problem out there looms large. When that mean person says something, when that person accuses us, when that thing hurts my knee, they're the things that loom large for us. And why the thought arises immediately, that's the problem, is because we've been practicing that thought for countless eons, Buddha says. That's the view of samsara. We're all samsaric philosophers, you know, and the samsaric philosophy would say it's the view that we're this innocent victim. I mean, this is so clear, we can feel it. We feel this way. We can be good little Buddhists for a long time, but just the smallest thing goes wrong. Look at us, you know, we forget all about that philosophy and we buy into the samsaric philosophy. We can see it's very deep. It's because it's habit. It's habit. It's habit. That's one major thing conspiring against us, because we spend all our energy looking at the outside world. This schizophrenic world we live in, this dualistic world of a separate me and the world out there. That's a huge one. So how do we counteract that? By thinking about karma, you know. So this is where we start to mold our mind in a shape we like. We listen to Buddha's teachings. We hear the Buddha saying us, well, you know, he disagrees with the concept of creator, and it's all there in the philosophy. It's all there in the text. It's all there in the material, in the body of knowledge, and all that knowledge in there. We need to look into it and study it and analyze and look at the logic of it, not just dismiss the concept, but see that it's actually a manifestation of the view of ego grasping, of ignorance, of marigpa, that sees that assumes something self-existent and inherent and intrinsic, that somehow is either named as self, and in terms of the person, it's named as self, and I, this intrinsic separate little bit that runs the show, that's permanent and uncaused. And that's exactly the same philosophy as take the whole world, and that's the creator. So the creator, the creator is the boss of the outside world, and the I is the boss of the inside world. But it's the same philosophy. There is something that is intrinsic, uncaused, permanent, unchanging, that is the boss of the world. It's called a creator or God, and of me, and it's called I. It's the same philosophy. It's the same philosophy. So we start looking at even at the law of cause and effect, it would counteract that one. Even just the law of cause and effect Forget the subtler meaning of emptiness. Even the law of cause and effect, the first level dependent arising, would argue with that view, would destabilize that view in our mind, get us to think and analyze and start to doubt. That's the first thing. Karma, junior school, entry level, grade 1, mold our mind, change the thoughts. But first we've got to identify the thoughts, and that's what's difficult because they're instinctive right now. And all instinct means is something that's so habitual that it's like second nature. So then you no longer think it's a concept. We just believe it's true. And as Amos says, that's the tragedy of the delusions. This is the major obstacle that conspires against us, knowing that we can change our minds. Is it not only does the world appear to us wrongly, the world appears back to us, as Lama Zopa says. The world appears out there back to us. It's reflected back to us in the mirror of our mind. The world is reflected back to us in the mirror of our mind in a way that's inaccurate. Because why? Because the mirror is polluted is distorted by attachment, distorted by anger, distorted by ego grasping, all these primordial delusions deep in the bones of our being. So the world is seen through those lenses, another analogy. So bad enough, as Lama Zopa says, that the world appears wrongly to us, that things appear wrongly to us, things appear in the aspect of whatever is in our mind, the delusions, bad enough that, but the worst thing is we believe them. This is the major obstacle conspiring against us. And when these habits are so strong, we don't even think we think anything. We don't think I'm a victim. We don't think it's not fair, I didn't ask to get born. We don't think it's not my fault. It's his, it's hers, it's theirs. We don't think that because they're so instinctive. Like a person who's playing who's been playing the piano for 50 years, they don't have to look at the music anymore. They don't have to say, I will now put my finger on C flat. It's instinctive. That's what instinct is simply the habit. So how come we're born in this life? This is what instinct means for the Buddha. Is the habit of having said, thought, and done those things so strongly in the past, we wake up as it's our second nature. So of course, because that's the deepest problem conspiring against us, looking into our mind, is that we just assume this is the way the world is. We assume it. It's at the level of assumption. All these delusions are at the level of assumption. So to even get to the point of wanting to change our mind already assumes that we accept at least that our mind is doing something and is informing the way the world appears to us. This is the Buddha's view. This is an astonishing view. It's an amazing view. It's an incredible view. It's unbelievable. And of course, it's rooted in emptiness. Everything leads to emptiness. This analysis leads us to emptiness, that nothing has an intrinsic character. There's nothing that isn't merely labeled. So all the teachings in the Lam Rim are leading us beautifully to this final view of emptiness, dependent arising. So it's hard work to mold our mind. First of all, we have to want to know we can, what we want to. That means we have to have confidence that why I'm suffering is because of my mind. Yes, of course, the boyfriend, the broken leg, the stuffed up nose, the external world, of course it plays a role. But here Buddha's emphasis is on getting us to become familiar with the mind. The mind, that's his expertise. So what level of mind? What mind is a very broad word, isn't it? So it's referring to two things. First of all, our sensory consciousness and our mental consciousness. There's a very distinct distinction, very distinct categorization. And it's fascinating even to look at this one carefully, to try and understand how the sensory consciousnesses work and how to distinguish them from the mental. This we tend not to do because we just think I'm this big, I'm a big lump of me plodding through life. I'm this lump of physical. We don't even delineate body, speech, and mind, for example. This is one of the major things we hear in Buddhism, isn't it? Body, speech, and mind. We don't delineate like that in the world. We know it's true. There is body, there is speech, and there is mind. We just think it's all me, this kind of concrete lump of me, So already it's incredible to distinguish these three, to delineate these three. And as we know, before we even begin to mold our mind into the shape we want, the mind of a virtuous, wise person, we have to first control the servants of the mind, the body and the speech. This is already tremendous. You're using your mind. The mind has to decide, but the mind is deciding first to control your body and speech. Already this is tremendous practice. This is the level of living in vows. This is the level of first level, junior school. This is junior school work. This is the first scope of the Lam Rim. The fundamental starting point, disciplining body and speech. If the world had disciplined body and speech, we would not harm each other. Think like that. Think of this. This is just astonishing. Forget molding your mind. Just control your body and speech already is miraculous. Absolutely miraculous. Then we have the luxury to get to high school, middle scope, and to start unpacking and unraveling this mind. So, but what's necessary, isn't it? We can say these words. Anybody, a person who's maybe a Christian or a Muslim or a materialist will hear it and will know and will get something from it. But what will inform our ability to do this and give us confidence, more confidence in it, in the Buddhist approach, is learn about the mind. Learn the nuts and bolts of the mind, which is what we study in low rig. When are we teaching low rig, John Drup? When's our next time someone's teaching the mind? Seriously low rig. Is Sangha going to teach that? Who?
We just did it. We just did it earlier last year. So it would probably be a couple of years before we cycle back to that basic.
Oh, no, you mean the basic program?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't mean we can't do it as an ordinary course, does it?
That's true.
We can't do it as a supplementary. I mean, we must, John. We can't wait 2 years. Don't you agree? We can do it as a supplementary. Anybody could teach it. You know, I mean, I teach the mind all the time. I mean, in a kind of easygoing way, don't I? So we need to do this. So I think it'd be marvelous to have maybe a short course or a month one or a weekend intensive, maybe Sangha or something, going through low rig in a very, the epistemological model, the psychological model, giving the essence of it. Don't you agree? I think it'd be brilliant. Because we need to know these nuts and bolts, people. We've got to know these nuts and bolts. We can all say the word mind, but if you're a materialist, you immediately think of your brain, which is okay. But we're not discussing the brain here. We're discussing the Buddhist view. So we have to know how to articulate it. I mean, this is what I said. I mean, I've studied all this stuff and I've forgotten half of it. I'm sorry, years ago. But I mean, it's like the fundamentals. I'm talking about it all the time. All the time. I almost feel like embarrassed. You're going to catch me out one day. But me, I'm cheating you, continually talking about the same thing. You kind of keep thinking, give me something new. That's how Lama Yeshe was. Lama Yeshe was like a scholar and yogi. No, I'm not a scholar and yogi. I'm not saying. I'm his daughter, though. And all he did was talk about the mind. Very simple. Constantly, never ceasing, unceasingly talking about the mind in the most casual way, This is what we have to do. Because this is part of the problem, studying. When we study, say, in the basic program or beyond, and study all the intellectual stuff, and it's very complex. I mean, you read some of the commentaries on the mind that are published. I mean, it's so complicated. It's like it's boring as hell. You think it's boring. What's all this boring stuff about? We can easily get captivated, though, by the intellectual stuff and then forget how to practice it. That's part of the problem. That's why Lama Yeshe, for me, was so amazing. He never got caught up in the intellectual. He was a yogi. He was a scholar. He spoke it about in the simplest way, So for me, even starting is what we learn in the epistemological model, which is utterly fascinating. I think scientists would blow their minds to study the Buddhist view of the way the mind functions, the epistemological model. It's utterly, utterly fascinating. The level of brilliance coming from these genius yogis, the Indians before Buddha, about the way the mind works and how that knowledge has come about. It's not with a microscope. It's the microscope of the mind on the mind itself. Internally, it's astonishing. There's no equivalent knowledge in the West. Absolutely certain. It's astonishing. But even to understand even basics, like, for example, sensory consciousness and mental consciousness. I mean, I always say the same little example, but it's kind of, the implication is profound. We can see the senses, they're the doorway to the world. If we didn't have senses, it's like we don't know how we would exist, because the senses are so predominant. As Lama Yeshe says, we make the body the boss. The 5 sensory consciousnesses. So the mind, first of all, mind. What is mind? Mind is that the definition of mind is that which usually you can, one way of describing a definition itself is there are two parts to it. One is it tells you the first part of the definition tells you its conventional character, its conventional nature. So, what's that, mummy? Well, we first give it a label. We've done this repeatedly, but it's important to hear it again and again and again. We've got to establish because Buddha's trying to get us to establish that which exists. He's trying to get us to see that which exists. Why? Because the delusions of the mind are cognizing phenomena that literally do not exist. We believe them. So you start with what is something? You name something and you define it. Then we can begin to discuss it. So that's called a thermos. What's a thermos, mummy? Give me the definition, please. Well, the first part will tell you its conventional character. Flat-bottomed, metal container. Good enough. You can see that. But this is the crucial part. And when we get to understand emptiness, this is the really crucial part. But mummy, what is it? In other words, what does it mean? What does it do? What is its function? What is it? They all mean the same thing. If something exists, it has to function. If something exists, it has to have a job. It has to be something and do something. And this is how you ground it in reality. If something exists. So, well, sweetheart, it keeps my tea warm. Now, you don't believe your mother. We'll believe anything anyone tells us. This is really vital. She needs to prove it to us. So what would she do? She would get the tea, she'll put it in, she'll put the lid on, and 3 hours later, she'll take the lid off, and she will now prove that it does fit the definition. It does indeed keep my tea warm. But even that's not enough yet. We've got to also make sure that what we have just defined as a thermos, that in the world that we know, there's no other definition that contradicts it. Then you can sign off, shake hands, and agree, now this is, conventionally speaking, a thermos. This is already, if we could just even get the conventional reality of the world clear, we'd all be geniuses and we'd all be happy. Not only do we not know the ultimate nature, we don't even know the conventional nature of things. We just make up, we're literally living in la la land, So, okay, so now what's the definition of a mind? Well, the two parts, and the first part tells you its conventional characteristics, which is pretty abstract for us. It says it's that which is clear, or clarity, or even they say luminous, which sounds very sweet. We think it's all cosmic. It means it's not physical. It means it's not physical. Clarity. Clarity doesn't mean clear thinking. It means not physical. That's its meaning. Or illuminous, it means that too. So that's already interesting. Well, there are lots of things that are not physical, like space is not physical. So what good is that? It's not physical. Now, what's the real point? What is the job of the mind? What is the function of the mind? What is the mind? What is the meaning of the mind? It's that which knows. It's that which cognizes. It's that which is aware. These three verbs are synonymous. This is incredible. This is huge. And this is what's interesting, as we know when we study, if we do eventually study, we've got to study Dura. We've got to put down Dura in our collected topics, in our schedule of teachings. It's usually the very first course they study in the monasteries, collected topics. So there you study, you study basically the map of the world, the components of the universe. So the very first word you use, the very first thing you use is there are phenomena, there are things that exist. This is a starting point. There are about 5 synonyms: that which existent, established base, phenomenon, object of knowledge. These are synonymous. So if something does exist, it has to be, it'll be one of those. And so this is what's fascinating. The definition of that which exists and existent. This is really fascinating. This shows the centrality of mind in Buddhism. The definition of an existent, there's phenomenon, object of knowledge, they've all got their own definitions, but they're all synonymous. They're different ways of presenting the same thing. So an existent is by definition, an existent is that which, oh, what was it? I forget. Oh, I suddenly forget the definition. Or that which is cognized by the mind. Yes, that which is cognized by the mind. This is incredible. In other words, something's being able to be cognized by the mind is what seals it as an existent. This is how utterly central mind in Buddhism is. This is incredible. That which the mind can cognize. That's by definition that which exists. So it's axiomatic. If the mind cognizes something, a valid cognition, that determines its existence. That's pretty incredible. That's astonishing, actually. So mind is incredible. So the mind is that which is not physical and that which cognizes. So all Buddha's trying to get us to do finally is to be in sync with what exists, to be in sync with that which exists. So right now he's telling us that in our mind, there are all these misconceptions and delusions, we're going to get to this, that misconstrue the world back to us. This is the pith, this is the essence of the entirety of Buddhism. If we can get this, everything else is helping us get this, then it all makes sense to us. You know, if we can't get the essence of what we're trying to do, we're in trouble. Buddhism is so confusing to us. The bottom line finally is that we are trying to get our mind to be in sync with reality. That is what a Buddha is finally. Removed all the delusions and in sync with reality, and as well as having, you know, infinite empathy for sentient beings. This is a very interesting point. It's fascinating. It's so clear. It's delicious. So then you've got to ask, well, why do we need to be in sync with reality? It sounds like being a scientist. You've got to know every damn thing in the universe. How exhausting. What the hell do I want that for? And this is what's fascinating. This, for me, is what's delicious, triple delicious. We all know that Buddhism is a method for getting happy and stopping suffering. That is clear. Here, the Four Noble Truths, it's all about that. Lord Buddha's first teaching. Then we hear this view that we're discussing here, which sounds a bit sort of intellectual, that it's all about getting wisdom. It's all about getting rid of ignorance. And it kind of sounds interesting, but you sort of tend to think I've got to go off and be a scientist and learn a million different weird things and learn all the languages. Sounds exhausting. And then the crucial point is, we'll think, what the hell has that got to do with happiness? If you have to choose between wisdom and happiness, we'd all go for happiness, I think. But this is what's fascinating. Is that for the Buddha, when we get this, we are on track, I promise. For the Buddha, the method for getting happy is to be in sync with reality. That's it. That's the one. And that's a shock, because I always quote this. You look at all the wisdom that we talk about in the materialist philosophical universe, the brilliant scientists, the brilliant musicians, the brilliant everybody, the geniuses, the amazing level of skill that we can cultivate in the external world. You can be the most genius mathematician in the universe, as I always joke and say, but you can go back home and beat up your husband and children every day. So in other words, it's got zero to do with being happy. Zero. And that's what's fascinating. That's what's incredible in the Buddhist view. The other component, of course, is about ethics. You could say Buddhism is a method of ethics. Buddhism is a method to stop suffering and get happiness. And Buddhism is a method to get wisdom. And they all come to the same thing. When we can get this, it's coherent to us. The whole path is coherent, you know. And it's all about the mind. The mind is what practices ethics. The mind is what gets happy. And the mind is what gets wisdom. Buddha's expertise is the mind. That's it. So we have sensory consciousness, and then we have mental. So we're driven by our senses. I mean, this is so huge. You know, we could easily talk on this topic just for the rest of the day. This is so massive. We don't even get past the sensory. I mean, just, you know, even having, like, you know, for Lou, his nose is blocked. I know I had a polyp taken away one time and I had to have my nose stuffed with stuff, you know, you can't breathe. Just that is such a vivid experience. There's Mary with her crutches. The body overwhelms us. One tiny little thing in my slippers this morning was hurting my poor little foot. A tiniest, miniaturest little miniature little thing for the body looms large in our lives. Not to mention the nightmarish physical suffering of so many human beings, all these poor people in Ukraine and people suffering every day, and little animals with their bodies broken in half and they can't even get a Band-Aid, you know. This physical suffering is so tremendous. Physical, and indeed the physical pleasure can be so tremendous. So we make the body absolutely the boss. We think it determines everything. I mean, our sensory experiences dominate our lives. As far as we're concerned, happiness is, if we're having happy feelings, happy physical feelings. That's what we think happiness is. And of course, we think the external world is the cause of it, the objects of the senses, which is why we spend all our lives trying to manipulate the external world, the objects of the five senses, to be just so that I can get some good feelings. This is samsara. This is what samsara means for the Buddha. And this is how we try to accomplish happiness. There's not a millisecond of the day we're not conscious of our body. This is not criticism. This is fact. It's fascinating. So let's look at what our sensory consciousness is. Actually, what is their job? If the mind cognizes everything that the mind does, Lama talks about this in Mahamudra. This is lovely how they talk about the mind, you know, that the mind is like a mirror, which is not how we think. And whatever the mind experiences is an object of them, is what is reflected back in the mirror of our mind. The world is reflected back to us in the mirror of our mind. So the outside world are the objects of the subject. Mind is always referred to as subject. And then objects of the mind is that which the mind cognizes. So then we've got to be very specific. And this is the clarity and the specificity, whatever the word is, of the Buddhist view. We need to know the contents of our mind, which is what we learn in Lorig. We need to learn the contents, the names of the parts of our mind. Because like everything, mind is a dependent arising. And one of the levels of dependent arising we all know is that everything exists in dependence upon its bits and pieces. Everything has parts. Everything has bits and pieces. A computer has bits and pieces, dependent arising. A light, a hand has bits and pieces. A nose has bits and pieces. Everything that exists, by definition, exists in dependence upon its bits and pieces, its parts. This is one of the arguments Buddha, you know, presents to argue with the earlier views of there being an intrinsic, partless I, or no causes and no parts. It's a whole philosophical view that Buddha argues with. Nothing that exists cannot have parts. It's not a possibility. And there's an extensive debate and analysis and meditation we need to do to prove this, because it's arguing with a particular view of a partless, set in stone me. So mind also has parts. Of course it does. So what are the parts of the mind? Well, you've got this moment of mind, the past, the future, this moment, that moment. You've got gross mind, subtle mind, sensory mind, mental consciousness. But also in the mental consciousness, there are the different thoughts. They're the parts of the mind, all the mental factors, as they call them in Buddhism, the thoughts, the concepts. But we've got the sensory and the mental first. And it's crucial that we distinguish these two. It's absolutely vital. But because our experiences are so oneness, we don't distinguish. And this is a major point. So every part of our mind has its own particular thing that it cognizes, has an own particular object. So I consciousness, which is that part of the mind, remember the mind is not physical. The I consciousness is not the eyeball. I consciousness, which is the mind, which is not physical, is that part of our mind that depends upon a decent working eyeball and all the nerves all working the right way and the lights being on and the eyelid being open. All the conditions come together that enable a particular cognition. And so what is it that I consciousness cognizes? What are the objects of sense of I consciousness? Precisely two. One is called color and one is called shape. So the senses, as Lama says, we make the body the boss, but the sensory consciousnesses are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition, but we give them power they don't have. So, you know, my simplest example every time, I will tell you the second my eyes lay on that, I will tell you that's a really nicely designed thermos. I chose it because I like, good design. Look up and that website and I chose this one. So we naturally assume, and you've heard me say this 50 times, we naturally instinctively assume that my I consciousness is seeing a well-designed thermos. Don't be ridiculous. It doesn't have the capacity. I consciousness can only cognize shape and color. It can't even articulate shape and color, but that's bare bones objects of eye consciousness is shape and color. This, and so it's clear, then the question has to be, what part of my mind is having a cognition? What part of my mind is cognizing a well-designed thermos? What part of my mind is cognizing a beautiful blue sky? What part of my mind is cognizing a beautiful sound? What part of my mind is cognizing a handsome boyfriend? I mean, these are the questions. This is already tremendous for us. Well, that's your mental consciousness, people. That's where the workshop is, as Lama's Opus is. And so, not joking, because of habit from countless lifetimes, and I always say this, and it's deadly true, quicker than Google, the millisecond my eye consciousness goes there, quicker than Google. And this is really true, as Lama Yeshe says in Mahamudra, it's almost like unbelievable, the power of the mind when you just got shamatha. That it's like your mind can count every atom in the universe. The clarity that we can accomplish is beyond insane. And this is just getting shamatha, which we've had in many lifetimes before, but we've lost it. So mental consciousness, now the millisecond my eye consciousness cognizes that shape and color, in a millionth of a trillionth of a second, my mental consciousness is accessed. And what is that? That's where the workshop is. That is where my thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconscious, opinions, viewpoints, ideas are all existing from countless lifetimes, are all stored. And this is what's fascinating. The Buddhist view is that whatever a mind ever has cognized, seen, heard, thought, tasted, touched, or smelt since beginningless time is necessarily stored in the mind, stored as memories. I mean, we talk about memories from a past, you know, from our childhood, flashes of moments of one thing that might have happened. We've had countless lifetimes, which means all those memories are stored in our mind. This is stupendous. That's why eventually we can have clairvoyance. When you removed all the obstacles, you can literally see all the past and all the future of all sentient beings. This is the capability of the mind. But at the moment, we're so caught up in the gross concepts, we can't see past our own nose. And we don't remember 99.999% of even today, and it's only 10:41 in Santa Fe. You asked me to account for everything I've seen and heard and tasted and touched and smelt and thought since I woke up. What a joke. So it shows how limited our intelligence is, how limited our mind is. So the senses are dumb animals, with all respect to our dumb animals. But look at the power we give them. We don't even notice that they're separate from the mental consciousness. And this is the trap. So what a well-designed thermos is a concept, is a thought, and think about that, it's an opinion, it's a viewpoint. So we live at the level of thoughts. And this is where, when you study the epistemological model, and I've forgotten most of it, we study in low rig, it's incredibly sophisticated. In the mental consciousness, when we study the mental consciousness, we've got two levels at which the mental consciousness functions. One is the grosser level, which is only the level we function at, which is called conceptuality. Now, that includes emotions, which is a big surprise. That includes anger, rage, despair, joy, happiness, suffering. It includes it's the grossest level of our mental consciousness is conceptuality. And it's a really gross, deceptive way of seeing the universe. This is why it's fascinating to study it. We can cover it in a weekend easily. Sangha, one of the good basic program people, could easily cover it, the essence of it, to give you the basis. And there's good stuff published, you know. It's utterly fascinating to study it. So we live at the level of thoughts. We live at the level of thoughts, conceptuality. And that's the point now. When we start to look into the mind, the mental consciousness, this is when we study what the components of our mind are, the mental consciousness. We've got precisely three people, three categories. I mean, you've heard me say this 1,000 times. We have negative, neurotic, non-virtuous, ridiculous, distorted, delusional, Lama Yeshe's got 30 synonyms for this, states of mind, called the root emotional ones, called anger, attachment, jealousy, resentment, arrogance, low self-esteem, depression. We know these intimately. They are conceptual stories programmed in our mind from so many lifetimes that they're now instinctive. And they happen to have the emotional component because they affect our body. So I think even this is fascinating. Why is it? Okay, we've got the brain way of describing why the body is affected, because, but we've got also the Vajrayana model, which is fascinating. We've got gross consciousness. Gross consciousness is the sensory, and that it goes along with the gross body. They work hand in hand together. You can't have one without the other. By definition, you can't have eye consciousness without an eyeball. Okay, subtle mind can also experience these things. It's okay. Then you've got subtle mind, which is your mental states. That's your subtle mind. And then you have the subtle physical energy that's described in the Vajrayana, which is the Tibetan medical system is based on. And you learn about that in the death process, which is these 72,000 subtle channels, and then coursing through all those channels, all these different wind energies, prana. And then intimately connected to those wind energies are the different states of mind, as His Holiness says in one of his books, the one about death, Mind of Clear Light, translated by Jeffrey Hopkins. Commentary on a Panchen Lama text about the death process, which is fast. It's wonderful to read that to support the Rinpoche's teachings in how to face death without fear. He says in there, it's just the way the world is. It's just the way the universe is. That all minds in the universe, there are trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions of minds, are all inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. This is just the way it is. And then those four elements are the same as the four elements out there. And this is how, when we understand this, the fundamental building blocks of the universe are mind and the four elements. That's it. So as Lama Zopa says, even when you just have an angry thought, anger in the mind, because the anger is connected to its own wind energy, which is your subtle body, that pollutes your wind energy, which eventually karmically manifests as sickness, which in turn eventually over many lifetimes manifests as the imbalance of the physical elements out there. The whole universe is like this, and it's on the basis of the wind energies, the four elements, and then the mind. And all minds are inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. So that's why when anger is very strong as a habit, you get born with it. My mother did not have to teach me. I had it down. Just like the little monkey. I remember some kind of monkey or ape or some kind of those people has got particularly attached to sex. When it comes out of mummy's womb, he turns around, he has sex with his mum and his dad and his sister and his auntie and his uncle and his grandpa. They really got the habit of having of attachment to sex, Well, I had anger. Luckily, I didn't have the other one. Thank God. Can you imagine thinking about jumping on somebody all day? Very depressing. Some people do. I know that. Especially you boys, I think. I've heard. Okay. Anyway, I had anger. My mummy did not have to teach me. I had it down. And so, of course, it was my true nature. Of course, I felt good about it. Of course, I thought it was real. I didn't question. But if my mother had said to me, well, Robina, your anger is just a series of conceptual thoughts, it's just an opinion you're having, I would have laughed at her. No, it's real, mummy. My sister did do that to me. But what I'm getting at here specifically, and this is one of the obstacles to why it's hard to change our mind, is because it feels like it's physical. Anger is like this storm inside us, isn't it? That's because the wind energies connected to my anger, which is particularly strong, are disturbed by the anger naturally. So it's like this raging storm in my body. It is literally physical. The anger is not physical. The anger is mental, but it's a conceptual story that over-exaggerates the ugliness of my sister in that case. How dare she do something that my attachment didn't want? All this is programmed in our mind, totally programmed. So the body roars to the surface, and the rage and the words come vomiting out the mouth, and the spit comes out the mouth, and the tears and the punches come. Anger's not physical, anger's mental. But it impacts upon the physical. That's why the physical that's why we experience our states of mind physically. This is the logic of it, using the Vajrayana model, which is so interesting. It explains it. That's why attachment. I always remember using the example of my Greek friend, Panos. He's given me permission to tell this story. He's really attached to sex. I think he's old now. He doesn't care so much, but when he's younger, he tells a story, when he's a little boy, 6 years old, walking down the street of Athens with his Greek Orthodox mummy, and he sees the poster of a half-naked lady in a cinema. And he pipes up with his little 6-year-old voice, Mummy, why is my penis standing up? This is literally explained because he's got attachment energy. His habit was attachment. Strong attachment, not to food, but to girl shapes. Female shapes is the imprint in his mind, the imprint in his mind of a girl shape. He's 6. He's never heard a word about sex. He sees a girl shape, and his mind goes berserk. Attachment rises up. And because attachment is connected to those wind energies and does their job, then the physical is then manifesting. So with the anger, the words vomit out the mouth. With attachment, his little thing stands up. It's the physical manifestation of the mind. That's why the Vajrayana I find so fascinatingly simple and explains these things, So he had programmed in his mind strong attachment to girl shapes. That's it. Girl shapes, 2 lumps on the chest. That's it. The shape was immediate, and his little thing stood up because the mind was there programmed. Like the little monkey came out of his mummy's womb and so attached to that, he just, that turns around and off he goes. This is how we're programmed. We're born with our own programming from the mind, but because the mind is connected to the body, for me, the body is the grossest manifestation of what's in the mind. And that's the only time. The tragedy is the only time we know what is going on in our mind is when the body feels it. That's our biggest, one of the major, I would say, one of the major obstacles in our modern culture for seeing our mind, to see our mind. We wait till the body feels it, and then it's too late. That's like going 100 miles an hour on the freeway, and you've never paid attention to your wheels, and finally, that's our tragedy in the West, why we all have mental breakdowns. Bipolar, this and manic depression and depression, all the other craziness, because we don't pay attention to the mind until we notice it physically. This is I swear to you, if we could see this, we could transform ourselves and we would never have a mental breakdown again, because we'd catch the mind before it gets to the level of physicality. That's why it's crucial to understand the relationship between the physical and the mental. Who's Mary Jo? Keep it up. That's it, darling. Mary Jo, that's it. Well done. Are we communicating, people? I'm saying a bunch of raving on things here. I'm just talking. But all of these things, which I've talked about before, is what we have to go through and unpack and drill down and look at and think about the way the mind functions and how it's related to the body. But how the mind is. So we're talking still here the sensory. We're talking the sensory and how it impacts upon the mental. Impacts upon the mental. So the sensory is bare bones, shape and color. Then the rest of it in the millisecond, the millionth of a second, is the no? Okay, I'm all right. Okay. So anyway, I'm just saying a few things here, and you've heard me say all of this before. So please, before I continue, to start to look into the mental states, the conceptual stories, which is a valid one and which is not. Are there any questions for clarity's sake? If not, it's fine. I'll continue. Okay, so we've got the sensory and we have the mental. The sensory is just bare bones, but we give it so much power. And then within a millisecond, the mental consciousness is taking over, and the level of mental is this conceptual, which is the grossest level. And the conceptual is basically viewpoints. I mean, we can, when we drill down and study it in more depth, we can be more precise about this. But just in general, whatever goes on in our mind day to day, there's 3 things only, three possibilities. There are thoughts that are not accurate, that are misrepresentations of their object. They are called deluded thoughts, or broadly speaking, deluded thoughts, negative thoughts, non-virtuous thoughts, misconceptions. There's lots of ways of breaking all those down, clearly, but broadly speaking. So we've got the 3 root ones. We know about those, the 3 root delusions that are the basis of all the others. And as we know, the root delusion, the one that underpins all the others, the primordial assumption of an intrinsic, separate, unlabeled me, then on the basis of this, which is the cause of why we're separate from others, this fear-based feeling, then we have intense hunger, emotional hunger, attachment to get what that me wants, and then the panic attack of aversion when it doesn't get what it wants. These 3 are the basis of all the other thousands. They all come down to these three the three root delusions. And their main function is they misrepresent the world back to us. They misrepresent the entire universe back to us. We see the world through the lenses of lies. This is what's utterly, utterly fascinating. Then you have the second category of states of mind that are relatively valid, not ultimately. Until you realize emptiness, you've still got mistake, because things still appear self-existent. But love, compassion, empathy, kindness, these are valid. They're conventional states of mind, and they are valid. Valid means they are, there's truth there. There's still relative reality until we realize emptiness. All the delusions have no basis in reality. They're underpinned by the ego grasping, and then causes everything to appear back to us as separate, over-exaggerated delicious, over-exaggerated ugly, over-exaggerated this or that. They're distorted, exaggerating states of mind, and they dominate our lives, and they're deeply ingrained. Then the virtuous states of mind, and the first lot are there, and therefore are the cause of our suffering and pain, not to mention the cause of why we do anything wrong to others, to harm others. The second lot are valid. Even if we could live mostly in those, the world will be a blissful place. And why, this is the curious point now, why is love called a valid state of mind? And why is attachment called a non-valid? I mean, it's a curious way to put it, but let's analyze this. This is the point. A valid state of mind is when the object of the mind exists. So the object of attachment doesn't exist, people. The object of attachment, let's say the object is called a chocolate cake. That's correct. You didn't get that wrong. It's not a carrot cake. So conventionally, it is a chocolate cake on that plate. Correct. But the rest of it is a lie. Attachment causes the cake to appear more delicious than it is. It causes the cake to appear to be the cause of your happiness. This is the lie part. That's the invalid part. So let's say call Fred. So I'm in love with Fred. So Fred, seen through the lenses of my attachment, that Fred doesn't exist. But Fred, seen through the lenses of love, that Fred does exist. Ultimately, still not, because I still see him as self-existent. But conventionally, love is a valid state of mind because it's connected to Fred. Attachment is a sense of a separate me and separate Fred. Love brings you closer, if you like, and there's a sense of interdependence, a sense of connectedness with Fred. And you see Fred's qualities, and you have a connection with Fred, and you want Fred to be happy. That's a valid state of mind. There's some validity there. We've got to understand these words. This is the Buddhist approach. It's not a question of just being a good person when you're supposed to love somebody and you're not supposed to be angry. It's naughty. Not like that. Look at the logic of it. Got to look at the logic of it. Virtues are valid states of mind because the object to some degree is existing. There's still a sense of separate me and separate Fred. That goes even when we ultimately finally realize emptiness, then you're really in sync with reality. We're talking even just conventional reality here. And the virtuous states of mind are the source of my happiness, and the source of therefore why I do anything that helps others. This is across the board a statement of fact for the Buddha. We've got to prove it to be true, not just believe it. So the third category, as we all know, they're called neutral insofar as they're neither virtuous nor non-virtuous, but I prefer to call them the mechanics of our mind. They're neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. You've got to understand this meaning because it has no meaning otherwise if you don't understand the Buddhist approach. Concentration is one of these categories. Good memory, attention, intention. These are all states of mind that are vital for our existence, but they're neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. This is why you've got to understand the meaning of this in Buddhist psychology. It's not the way we think in modern psychology. It just sounds like religion and it sounds like judgment, and we can't stand talking that way. We've got to see what Buddha's meaning by this. This is the basis for doing the work on our own minds. If we can't distinguish between these three, you're lost. We've all heard this 1,000 times. We have to keep hearing until we start to become natural for us, when we start to really practice, you know. So what is the shape we want to mold our mind into? What is the shape we want to start with by molding our concepts? What concepts do we want to try and cultivate? What concepts are we trying to uncultivate? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? We want to slowly, we have to first identify, distinguish between a delusion and a virtue. That's the fundamental job. And you can't do that until you learn it theoretically. You can go off and look at it. You know, this is why I talk about mindfulness meditation. It's interesting. We tend to think of it as just sort of sitting there and watching something, concentrating. And it's good to do that. But let's just say you have really good concentration and you've been looking at a garden. You've been being mindful of a garden. You could have it so accurate in your mind, you could even replicate the entire garden in a drawing, because you can see every tiny piece. You're really mindful. You've really got good concentration, and you can see all the bits of the garden. Now, what good is that? What good is that unless you can identify what you're seeing? This is where we can really be nihilistic and think just being mindful means just merely watching something. There is a part of practice is that you need to stop labeling. When you do Mahamudra, you've got to stop the labeling. It's really true. You've got to stop the labeling. As Lama says, Yeshe says in Mahamudra, you've got to, even if it's a good thought, you've got to stop labeling. There's a crucial reason for that, to get beyond the conceptuality. But don't over-exaggerate that job and think that's what you're supposed to do all the time. Oh, well, there's war, there's murder, there's sexual violence. Just watch it. Don't label it. That's nihilism. Because if the job eventually is to rid the mind of delusions and develop to perfection the virtues, it's obvious you have to distinguish between them. Part of the process in Mahamudra or seeing your mind, stepping out of your mind, it's a major practice and it's necessary. But eventually you use your wisdom to identify the delusion so you can see how it's a lie. You stop believing in it and you start to argue with it until eventually it's gone. So you've got to have that ability. You've got to be intelligent about it. This is really, really crucial. So if you can sit there being mindful of this entire garden and replicate it in a perfect drawing, how clever you are. But what good is it? It's just idiocy if you can't finally distinguish between a herb and a flower. What's the point, you know? That's where we can be really nihilistic. Oh, well, just observe everything for what it is. Yeah, if you misunderstand that, you're in serious trouble, I tell you. The job is to distinguish. You've got to have one of the states of mind that's the neutral ones of the mechanics is called discrimination. It's one of the ones that's there every single second. And this is why it's so important for the Buddha that when he described the contents of a person into the 5 components, the 5 aggregates, he plucked out from the different mental factors the one called discrimination or discernment, because it's of its role in our suffering. And it's got a massive role, and it's every millisecond of the day it's functioning to distinguish between this and that and gold and pink and blue and window and this and green and yellow and blue and shape every millisecond. And if you don't have this discernment, you are mentally ill. You'd be like mentally ill. You'd be gone out. You'd lose your brain completely. This is absolutely crucial state of mind. And where we need it most as a practitioner is internal discernment, internal discrimination, internal distinguishing these different terms. You have to distinguish between a virtue and a non-virtue. This is the job of being a Buddhist. Millisecond by millisecond by millisecond. It's actually a super advanced job, but this is what we're heading to. And if you don't know botany, you can know a garden you can memorize it perfectly. But if you can't label the flower from the weed from the herb, then you are just an idiot. So if you cannot distinguish in your mind between love and attachment, for example, because they come together, then how can you change? How can you mold your mind into the shape of a virtuous, kind person? You can't. You have to know the difference. And you first have to learn the theory. What is a delusion? By definition, it is a conceptual state of mind that exaggerates a certain aspect of an object. Attachment exaggerates deliciousness. Anger exaggerates ugliness. Pride exaggerates importance. Low self-esteem exaggerates lack of importance. That's their job That's what they do. They exaggerate. So we're living in la-la land because of these. And that's why we go up and down like yo-yos. That's why we're all bipolar. We're all up and down like yo-yos. Suddenly when attachment gets what it wants and you're in love with Fred, everything's perfect. You're completely in bliss, like you're riding in sky high. That's attachment gone mad. Then the bubble will burst and you'll crash down to despair. We are all bipolar, and don't think I'm joking. It's just a question of degree. Because we allow our minds to run rampant because we don't have control, you know. So the three poisons, as the Buddha calls them, the three toxic emotions, are the root of all the others. I remember the young Ling Rinpoche, you know, His Holiness Dalai Lama's root guru, who passed away in the 80s, and now his young reincarnation. He's a similar age to Lama Ursula, I think. Speaks beautiful English. He's so special, holy being. His Holiness's root guru. As he says in his teachings, you know, the Buddha talks about 84,000, you know, neurotic states of mind. And he says 21,000 are rooted in ignorance, 21,000 are rooted in attachment, and 21,000 are rooted in anger. And the other 21,000 are rooted in all three. So it's this really coherent map of the mind, not the brain, the actual subjective cognitive process itself. And we're talking about the conceptual level, which is the grossest level, the tip of the iceberg. In the mental consciousness, of course, we've got subtle level, which is called eventually perception, direct, non-conceptual cognition of something, which you can only access when you've got single point of concentration. That's when you start to become in sync with reality. So all we've done today is talk low rig. Okay, all I'm doing is talk low rig, except in my simple, casual Australian way. So it's good to get more nuts and bolts of people, get a structure. Geshe, you know, we should use Geshe Tashi's book published by Wisdom, you know, Buddhist Psychology. Geshe Tashi in London, he taught it very particularly for Western people. There's more complex ones as well, but I'm just talking very casually about it, you know. This is the stuff. This is the basis of being a Buddhist. You can sit there looking holy with your bald head and your robes. You can do your prostrations, do your mantras, you know, do your prayers, sing your this and do that. And you can do all that, but you're not being a Buddhist yet. That's just the trappings. Now, they're crucial. They're the things that prepare your mind. They're like doing the push-ups and the jogging and the going on good diet to prepare you to play tennis. Here, the playing tennis here is working on your mind. So our prostrations and our mandalas and our this are all the preliminary practices. They're like the push-ups and the jogging that prepare your body to start play tennis properly. These prepare your mind to start doing the job that we're discussing today. This is the job of being a Buddhist. This is the job. So we don't really start to do this until we get to the middle scope, where we start to work on our minds. You can say like that. And then we can, by changing our thoughts. So of course, the thoughts are not going to go overnight. Don't get depressed. They're deeply ingrained. They're habitual. They're completely programmed in us. It's going to take a lot of time. And that's why one of the most magical first levels of practice, which puts atomic bombs under the delusions, is that you catch your mind completely overexcited about the cake, completely believing the delicious cake that's vibrating delicious at you, begging you to eat it. You believe it was be the cause of your happiness, and it's like so excited. But you catch it and you say, it's not true, Robina. Even you don't know it's not true, but even you can't, it still looks delicious, but you don't believe it. This puts atomic bombs. Bad enough, as Lama Zopa says, that the world appears to us wrongly. The cake appears to us wrongly. Bad enough. But the worst thing is what keeps us absolutely imprisoned in samsara is we believe it. We believe it. So as Pabongka said one time, even you have no idea what the word emptiness means. Just think, maybe things don't exist the way they appear. This whole approach is absolutely central if we can understand it. You know, it's amazing. Just not believing it. Not sure what it means yet, but just don't believe. This is profound. Then you've got space and time to start chipping away at the misconceptions, proving to yourself that they're not true, which comes from hard experience, you know. That's why if habits are very strong, like you've got stronger sexual attachment, or strong attachment to video games 5 hours a day, or strong attachment to eating food, or whatever the attachment is, you know, one of the signs of attachment is very simple. One of the signs of attachment is you think of the object all the time. So just by looking into what you think about all the time, it tells you the attachment, you know. It could be jumping on girls, could be video games, could be money, could be your body. We're all attached to the body. We think about body day and night. Could be food. It could be killing fish, you know. It could be jumping on girls like panos. It's pretty clear. A sign of attachment is if you're thinking it all the time. It's not, no, a sign of attachment is you're thinking about something that's not there. That's what they say. It's so simple, it's embarrassing, isn't it? So then you start to see your mind. You see it thinking. So at least when you start to realize it's an exaggeration and it's an old habit, you start to hear the thoughts. You can't force them away, but you hear it. But you don't follow. That's why junior school entry level grade 1 is don't follow it. Control the servant of the mind. Don't put the hand on the cake. Don't put the button on your computer and do the video game. Don't jump on the girl. Don't go to the porn site. This is hard. This is the work that's really hard. Already just controlling our body and speech is really hard, you know. And because we feel so ashamed about it and so guilty, we hide it. We don't want anybody to know about it. We even try to hide it from ourselves, you know. So we've got to be so sincere with ourselves and so kind and so honest, so authentic. We've got to know our delusions. We've got to know what our habits are. Own them happily, bring them to the front, be kind to yourself. I can't stress that one enough, because we love to hate ourselves. So control the body and speech first. This is why we live in vows. Put atomic bombs under the habits just by living in vows, you know. So I think some time for some questions. Come on. I've said an awful lot of things which you've all heard before, but just to remind. Are there questions, please? Otherwise, we'll have a little break or something. 11 till 11, it's 12 noon. We're going to have a break, right? Okay. We're going to break
Please
when we
raise your hands or unmute.
Just any old question, any thing to clarify concepts, clarify definitions, clarify ideas, anything at all. Doesn't matter if you don't. Doesn't matter at all. Doesn't matter. So the other thing that conspires, all these things I've discussed already, but of course the major one that conspires against us doing the work is the inability to distinguish between, for example, attachment, which is in the negative, unhappy category, and love, which is, let's say, in the positive, virtuous category. This is a major one. So let's just analyze them. We can see by doing this analysis, we can start to see the different characteristics of love and the characteristic of attachment. But the trouble is, this is the trouble. It's like in your garden, if all the weeds politely grew down one end and the herbs grew down the other end, you wouldn't have a problem discriminating, would you? But no, they all grow together. So I always use this example. One of my nephews is a horticulturist. So I remember at our centre, a teacher centre in a couple of hours north of Melbourne. It's a very flat, barren kind of area. And as far as I'm concerned, it's just boring looking. I know nothing about growing things, nothing about plants. I mean, I can recognise a gum tree, as we call it in Australia. I can recognise a rose, maybe, but nothing much else. Whereas Justin, we're walking together, and then all these just this barren looking stuff, and he's pointing out, look at that little berry, and look at that little leaf over there. You do this one, it's got vitamin C, you can do that, and look at that little one over there. I had no idea what he's talking about, because he had the skill. I think it's a great analogy. He had the incredible skill to look at what appeared to me like a bunch of boring growing stuff. He could distinguish all the little pieces. That's the skill we need with our own mind, people. This is the brilliance of the Buddhist analysis, the brilliance of the Buddhist view that establishes and identifies and describes the actual subjective cognitive thoughts themselves, not the piece of the brain, which is another piece of knowledge. I'm not complaining about it. So this is super subjective, but super clear. We don't have this level of confidence, I think. In the West, I think we put psychology at the lowest of the totem pole, don't we? It's not a hard science, but it's the absolute opposite for the Buddha, you know. So yes. Hello, Ginny, talk to me.
Okay. I'm a little bit confused about, you said if you can draw a perfect picture of the garden. Can you hear me okay?
I can, absolutely, yes.
Okay. So if you have a perfect picture like a painting, and you said if you can't distinguish between the flowers and the herbs and the weeds, that it's no good or something. And if it's just a painting of a beautiful garden, I mean, can't we enjoy it like that?
Oh, that's not of course, Ginny, that's not what I'm saying, though.
Yeah,
that's not what I'm saying, darling. The point I'm saying, what I'm saying is, if we're trying to be a gardener, if you want to be a botanist, you can't just have good mindfulness and say that you in other words, I'm using the analogy of people's mistaken view of mindfulness, which is merely watching the mind and never doing anything about it. I've got really good mindfulness, and it is an important practice just to observe the mind without analysis. But people over exaggerate that job and think that that's all you're supposed to do. So that's the analogy of the garden. You think you're a good botanist, you can memorize the garden perfectly, but you don't know what to do with what's there. That's the point. Of course, beautiful paintings, the more the better. You get my point?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you for asking. It's a really good point. I'm mainly pointing out again, there is a technique in Buddhism, and indeed it is in Mahamudra, where we need to step back from our mind. We need to step back and we need to stop labeling. It is a crucial practice. It's vital to stop all this constant drama, swimming in our own misery. I'm this, I'm that, he's this, she's that. We've got to give it a break and step back and simply allow the thoughts to come and go. That is a major practice. But what I'm saying is, when we over exaggerate that job and think then therefore in the world, oh, well, there's murder, there's sexual violence, and just observe it. That's nihilism. It's got a particular role in our work, but eventually we need to develop the clear discrimination to distinguish between virtue and non-virtue in the external world and in the mind, so we can do something about it. That's the analogy. You've got to distinguish between herbs and weeds, you know. That's the point. Thank you for asking, Ginny. It's a really good point. Thank you so much. Anything else? Yes, Nancy.
Venerable, you had mentioned earlier, and I'm not sure I'm getting this, that so often when we learn about meditation, we learn to feel what's in our body. So something comes up, whether it's anger, and then you start working with your mind. And I think you mentioned that that we can work with our mind before we feel it in our body, even if we don't act on it.
No, good, Nancy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, first of all, it is a practice. I mean, but different people use different approaches. I don't use the approach of looking at my body first. I've never done that in my whole life. It will get me confused. That's why when Nancy comes and does her wonderful treatments, because she's a brilliant chiropractor, luckily she doesn't, but people say, feel it in your body. What does it feel like? I wouldn't have a bloody clue what it feels like. I just don't use that approach. I'm joking now. But what I'm getting at, Nancy, is really important. One of the techniques that Lord Buddha teaches at the very beginning stages of beginning to develop insight into what goes on in our mind, one of his first techniques is to observe the sensations of the body. And why? Not because he wants us to get insight into the body, but he wants us to get insight into the fact that things change. He wants us to get insight into impermanence. So that's a particular technique of observing what goes on in the body. Now, what I'm saying for us in our culture, because we're so fixated on the body and don't discriminate between body and mind, not to mention speech, then we don't notice that we're angry. I did not know I was angry until the words came out my mouth. Look at Will Smith. Look at Paul Will. He was angry with Chris Rock. Now, maybe he's been angry with Chris Rock in the past, but he's never expressed it. And there he was suddenly, and it exploded out of his own mouth and his own body. He probably is more shocked than everybody else. Are you hearing what I'm saying, people? Because he did not have awareness of what the hell was going on in his mind until it was too late. That's what I'm saying. And that's why the first level of practice, Nancy, is control the body, control the speech. At least if we can really harness our body and speech, we will not do damage. But this is already such a high practice. Look at us. Most of us have no control over our body and speech. You get my point? So the first one is at least use your mind to decide to control your body and speech. Then you have the luxury of going to the middle scope, and now you start to look into the delusions and identify attachment, because you've got the miracle of space. So the real job for a Buddhist, this is the point, Nancy, that once we've begun to control our body and speech, which is already tremendous, we've now got the luxury with concentration meditation to get better and better at observing the thoughts themselves well before they rise to the surface as emotions. That's the miracle of Buddha's approach. Because the anger, the vomiting out of Will's mouth, those thoughts are already in his mind. He's probably had them 1,000 times, but not on public stage. And they suddenly vomited out of his mouth, and he was shocked. He was shocked as much as anybody, I bet, because he hadn't learned to control his body and speech. So when you can really work on your mind, Nancy, this is really what being a Buddhist is. Once you've got concentration, once you're living in your vows, once you've harnessed and got the discipline of controlling your body and speech, now you have the luxury of going ever more deeply and observing the conceptual stories well before they're violent, well before they're emotional. And if once we get to that level of practice, you can guarantee you'll never have a mental breakdown in your whole life. So this is the level, and I'm not even talking about having concentration yet. I'm not even talking about realizing emptiness yet. This is the work we can accomplish. You with me? Yeah, good. That's why it's vital to understand that what we call an emotion, anger and attachment, are deep down rooted in being a precise conceptual story. You get my point, Nancy? That's why we have to understand that when we study the mind. Initially, it's a shock that anger, when it's vomiting out the mouth, but it's so obvious. There's poor Will screaming those words, doing that beating, walking, standing up, going over to, Chris and whacking him. All of that came from thoughts. They were in his mind. He's probably been mad at Chris Rock for years. But suddenly it all rose to the surface. No control at all. And to say that it all came from thoughts, it's so obvious it came from thoughts, but we don't think like that in our culture. But it's so evident. If those thoughts weren't in his mind, I promise you, he would not have stood up and hit Chris Rock. It's so clear, but we're so caught up in we're so addicted to emotion that we can't hear that it's rooted in being conceptual thoughts. You get my point, Nancy? This is the Buddhist approach. It's like cognitive therapy. Buddha is your genius cognitive therapist, I tell you. But and this is the other point. When we get single point of concentration, which, as we know, is that technique that is in its nature non-conceptual. You've utterly subdued the gross conceptual level. But don't mistake that and think that you can never be conceptual, because this is the real point. Then you would use that super subtle, clear, focused level of laser-like mind in the second mode of meditation. This is a classical combination of the two modes of meditation. Let's say you've studied your dependent arising in your class that day. You go home, you sit down, you get some concentration. Let's say you've even achieved the second level of concentration. Pretty amazing. You've already got a little, pretty focused mind. What you're going to do now, you've got that focused level of mind, which you've got from being non-conceptual, but now you get that laser-like focus, and now you go to the second mode of meditation, and you take the concepts you learned that day on dependent arising, and you use that focus level of mind in a conceptual way. You can use your, in one of Tsongkhapa's Lam Rim text, it says that, basically, when you've got even single point of concentration, you can use that at a level of such sophisticated conceptuality, we wouldn't believe it. But you don't just stay there like a moron, non-conceptual. You can use it conceptually very quickly to argue with ego's absurd views, and that's how you finally realize emptiness. You use conceptuality to get insight into reality. So don't think you just give up conceptuality and become like an idiot. It's not like that. You have total, once you've got concentration, you've got complete control over your conceptuality, and you can use it like some kind of genius to do amazing, subtle analysis. That is the method for realizing emptiness, for realizing all these points, you know. This is a really important point to understand. What else, people? Any other questions? I think, is it okay we have a break now instead? Lundrup, Venerable Dundrup, is that okay with you? Venerable Dundrup? Do you mind? Dundrup? Can't you hear me? Why can't Dundrup hear me? Can someone talk to Dundrup for me?
I'll message Venerable Dundrup now.
Okay. So I think I'll have a break now. I think because I talk so fast and so shouting so loud, it's exhausting for everybody, including me. So have a 30-minute, we'll have an hour's break now, come back at, but I want to check everyone's okay with that, because I mean, maybe someone's going to come back to the afternoon session and I'll be too early. What do you think, people? Is that okay? An hour's break? Discuss it. Okay, good. So that's 11:30 for me, so 12:30. Okay. I'm driving off to Albuquerque tonight because I'm going to fly off to New York tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. I'll be gone for a month, but you won't notice because my picture will be the same behind. I'll be in New York and then I'll be in Florida. Not in Alabama though, Christy. I'll maybe get to Alabama one day. Okay, darlings, I'll see you in 1 hour. Contemplate, think about what I've said. Try and just, I mean, you've heard it 1,000 times before, but it will help it go a bit deeper, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, okay? Thank you, darling. See you in an hour. All right, everybody. So I'd like to know if there are any questions, any questions, people? Any questions? If not, I think I want to go into more depth. This point that Nancy brought up, you know, which is something that when we get this, it really makes a big change in our minds and our lives, you know, this point that Nancy brought up. So let's just go into this in more detail. So remember, we're here, and again, another, how long we're going to be here, whatever it is. Think, listen, analyze, contemplate, keep our minds wide open. We've heard it 1,000 times before, but it's always good every time you hear it, it gets a bit clearer. I think we can all see that. And I even find that, I swear to you, by talking about it, I never get bored, because every time I say it, it gets a bit clearer. So thank you for the opportunity. For me, it's always very delicious, you know. So the point is this. The Buddhist view of the mind is that these, you know, that as we've been discussing, we've got these incredibly much subtler levels of mind, of cognition, of ability to know, of ability to be aware. This is the key thing to really understand. If we take as a given the materialist view, which is the person you see being born, coming from the genes, and then you are a person instinctively angry or jealous or loving or compassionate, and of course we track it back to the parents. We're trying to try and analyze why a person wants to murder, why a person wants to be generous. We look at, and the only way we look, as we can see this, the only way we can look, the only place we can look in this materialist view, and it's not criticism, it's just fact, is into the parents, because where else do we come from? That, if, as a materialist, you're not factoring in a creator, therefore you're not factoring in another component called a soul. You're only factoring in what you can see, the brain, the DNA, the genes. That's all we can look at, isn't it? Which is okay, it's fine, that's the view. Well, the Buddha's view is not like that. It's not the creator one. You're not looking at some component coming from a creator. You're looking at the mind itself. And the Buddha's view, as we know, the analysis of the mind coming from these amazing Indians well before the Buddha, they're the ones who created this technique called shamatha, this capacity for incredibly subtle samadhi, concentration, at a level of mind that's so subtle, as I keep repeating it, but it's important to hear this, that isn't something cosmic or spiritual or holy or separate like a spirit or a soul. It's simply a subtler level of the mind that you function at every day. It's just subtler levels, that's all. And this ingenious technique enables us to access those subtler levels. It isn't cosmic, it's just more subtle. So when we understand this, then we can see that we live at the tip of the iceberg of our mind. We get born programmed with tendencies. Now, as we know, of the 4 ways that karma ripens, our past actions ripen in the present as our tendencies. You know, there's called tendencies or actions similar to the cause. In other words, we come into this life programmed with habits. So obviously, again, the materialist model would say they're mummies and daddies' habits, and then their grandpas and back to the monkeys' habits. But then we get confused, because then you see, you know, some nice Austrian housewife gives birth to Hitler, and they can't find evidence in any of her behavior of why he's like this. So then, of course, we're puzzled. Yeah, I remember the Columbine kids 20 something years ago. I remember this one. You know, they did it in secret at the time. They dug up the brains of these 2 boys, so determined to try and find where did this behavior come from, because he couldn't find it in their nice white Christian parents. So, of course, in the materialist world, positing only the physical, you get stuck. You can't find the answer. So the Buddha's, and of course, if you're a Christian, then we say that God gave us free will and that Hitler chose to be evil, whatever you like. Okay, that's that view. But the Buddha view is not this. Mind is not physical. It is not the handiwork of mummy or daddy. This is not meant to be kind of arrogant. It's just in trying to give us the logic, you know. It's not the handiwork of a creator, and it can't come from nothing. Everything is habit. Everything is a continuity of cause and effect, you know. I mean, we know perfectly well if you're good at piano, it's because you've practiced. It's not rocket science. We know well if you're good at anger, you must have practiced it, except we don't like to hear that. That's where we're very interested. This is a really good point. We know in our world that if you show the evidence of your being good at math is that you've practiced it. The evidence that you're good at music is you've practiced it. The evidence, but we don't like the idea that if you're angry, the evidence is that you've practiced anger, because we have a whole set of different rules, don't we, when it comes to emotional stuff. I find this very fascinating, actually. The Buddha says the mind is the mind is the mind. So whether it's a tendency to be good at music or murder, it's the same principle. There's no distinction between emotional stuff and intellectual or artistic skills. Whatever we express is the evidence of a habit. There's a really crucial point. This is one of the ways that karma ripens. You're good at music, you're good at murder, you're good at kindness, you're good at love, you're good at attachment. They're all the same. But this is the radical difference in our culture. We take responsibility for the fact that we're good at music. We're proud to own responsibility. We know it's the fruit of practice. But when it comes to love, we go, well, you know, it's just the way I am. We don't think of it any other way. We see it as set in stone. We don't see it as a process. We don't see that you've molded your mind from past loving kindness into being born with loving kindness that predominates. Equally, we don't take responsibility for the anger or the jealousy. Why? Because we have a whole set of rules that say, I'm angry because my mother did this. I'm kind. Well, it's just the way life is. You know, we don't analyze. We don't see it as part of a process. I find this really fascinating. Whereas we can see with the Buddha, they all got equal status. They're a bunch of habits. So clearly you can see some child in this life. I remember always, you know, reading this, one of those serial killers from years ago, talking about how as a tiny boy, he was compelled to torture the little creatures. He didn't know why. His mother didn't teach him. I always tell the story of my friend and her little 3-year-old son. She's a Buddhist, he's a Buddhist, who was in tears of compassion for the lice that she was taking out of his head. She hadn't taught him that. They're just all their habits. So, but when it's emotional stuff, we just think, well, it's kind of mystical, you know. But we know you can mold your mind into the mind of a carpenter. We know you can mold your mind into the mind of a musician. And Buddha's saying we can mold our mind into the mind of a virtuous, wise person. When we get this, then we're going to persevere and have a bit of humility. Instead of all the guilt and the drama and I'm bad and I'm hopeless and I'm stuck and I can't do it, it's no good, this is who I am. That's because these are such primordial habits. We can be forgiven for thinking that they're in the core of our being. And that's what we tend to think in the materialist world. This is again, a crucial point to understand it. As we know, Buddha has found it's possible to rid the mind utterly of all these nonsense states of mind. But that is shocking in the materialist model. That sounds like you're cutting half of a person away. Like, in other words, we give equal status to anger, depression, love, and kindness. We're all just, this is how we are, we say. And so the idea that you can rid your mind utterly of some of those components is just too bizarre for us. We need to really think this through. So we can mold our mind. It's just that these habits are very deep. When we understand this, we'll have a bit of humility and patience with ourselves. And that's when we understand the logic, as Lama Zopa says, that one of the, the functions that the Buddhist view says, one of the functions of these unhappy states of mind, the key function is they distort and exaggerate the thing that they're observing. Attachment distorts the deliciousness of Fred. And then anger distorts the ugliness of Fred when he's cheated on you. Attachment distorts the deliciousness, exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake before you've eaten it. And after 5 pieces, now aversion exaggerates the ugliness of the cake. We do this all the time. So they're not at the core of our being. When we can understand this logically, and so, okay, there's many things I want to talk about. I keep going in different directions. Let's look at the logic. When we can see the logic of this, this is very encouraging. This is the logic of why is it we can mold our mind, I love that saying, Rinpoche's saying, into the shape of what? A wise, virtuous person, a person who's completed the 2 wings of the bird, wisdom and compassion. A person who's completely rid from their mind all neuroses and has perfected all the wisdom and goodness. That's essentially what a Buddha is. So what's the logic for this? Not just cross your fingers and hope for the best. Well, the logic of it is rooted in the understanding, like we've been talking, of how all the unhappy emotions, as we've been describing, and Nancy's point, we're getting to it, all these emotions, as we call them, these physically based emotions, are rooted in being misconceptions, in the bones of our being, misconceptions. That's the key component of a non-virtuous or negative or deluded state of mind. Attachment, anger, jealousy. They're not the only misconceptions. Buddha will also say the view of no cause and effect is a misconception. The view of a creator is a misconception. The view that your mind is the brain is a misconception. They're more like the philosophical views, but they're all come down to being views. But there are some of them, these are the emotional ones, the very deeply ingrained misconceptions. So when we understand that a misconception is simply, it's a view in the mind that isn't correct. So what does correct mean? This is not a moral issue. If I say 1 + 1 is 3, we know, because we know simple math, we've learned the convention called math, that's a misconception. So but let's get clear. Why is it a misconception? Because we've got a system called math that we've all agreed upon, that we all buy into, and it's called addition. 1, 2, 3, we agree upon that. We give, and this is really emptiness. We give it that validity. And then we agree if you have 1 and 1, you call it 2. If you've got 1 + 1 + 1, you call it 3. They're conventional realities. It's a convention in the world called math, however you call it. So that's a relative truth. And this is what's interesting. Why is it true? Listen to this, because we've agreed to it. We've agreed to it. It works. That's what conventional truth means. And it proves emptiness. There's nothing intrinsic about it. So 1 + 1 + 1 + 3 is a misconception. 1 + 1 is 3 is a misconception. And now this is the interesting point too. Something that's a misconception isn't just wrong in itself. It's wrong in reference to something. So it's wrong in reference to the convention called math. So a misconception. Okay, so now the Buddha's telling us we can remove all misconceptions from the mind. He's talking about the emotional afflictions and all the other misconceptions like no karma, creator, blah, blah. He says they're misconceptions. They're not a valid assessment of reality. You don't believe him. This is what we tend to think of religion. We think religion is God has made this up, Buddha's made this up, and we have to just shove down our throat. No, if Buddha's wrong, then he's happy to hear it. And as His Holiness says, if we can prove the Buddha is wrong, then you must reject him. Of course you must. So this is something you have to accept, not just you have to understand, not just believe Buddha. That's what we usually think religion is. That's just idiocy for Buddha. He's talking about reality. So, okay, he's telling us we can remove all these afflictions from our mind. We can mold our mind into the mind of a wise, compassionate person. Let's prove how we can do that. So, a misconception. All the delusions are misconceptions, all the way to the root delusion that posits a real, intrinsic, uncaused, permanent, unchanging, intrinsic, inherent me. Buddha's telling us that's the root misconception. And the believing in that misconception for eons is what gives rise to then the attachment, which exaggerates the deliciousness of things, the aversion that exaggerates the ugliness of things, and all the other dramas. They're all misconceptions. When they have this additional component of intensely emotional pain. So he's telling us we can remove misconceptions from the mind. Well, let's prove it very simply. 1 + 1 is 3, I will say. And I'm learning math, right? And you say, Robina, don't be silly. It's 1 + 1 is 2. And I think, oh, because I didn't mean to. I just sort of said it without, because I hadn't practiced properly. Of course, you're right. Of course, you're right. 1 + 1 is 2. Now, listen to this. There was a thought in my mind. And the thought was 1 + 1 is 3. That's a thought, okay? Now, I thought about it. I heard what you said, and I agreed with you because I agreed with you, not just to believe in you. I agreed with you because I thought it through. And I then had another thought. Yes, 1 + 1 is 2. Now, 1 + 1 is 3 is a thought. 1 + 1 is 2 is a thought. Well, one is a misconception and one is a valid conception within the framework of math. We get that. So this is the point now. This is the point. 1 + 1 and 3 was in my mind. Then I changed it to 1 + 1 is 2. Now, what happened to the first thought? That's the question. What happened to the first thought? Well, I'll tell you, it disappeared. Where to? Into a puff of smoke. And why? What made it go is the conviction in my mind from my own logic and analysis that the real truth, the truth was 1 + 1 is 2. So my conviction of the truth, 1 + 1 is 2, is what drove away the misconception. So that's exactly how you become enlightened. Through the entire process of working on the mind, going through the Lam Rim, understanding karma, understanding impermanence, understanding the delusions, understanding all these things, understanding bodhicitta, getting all the way to emptiness, all of it is this gradual process of learning, buying into, and we've chosen it, no one's forcing us, buying into Buddha's assessment, like learning math. You're learning math. You're learning math. Somebody, clever person's, has come up with all these ideas, and we can prove it to be true. So we're programming our mind with math, and what that does is counteract the misconceptions in our mind before. But what we're learning here, if we choose to be a Buddhist, we're programming our mind with karma, impermanence, bodhicitta, the delusions, and eventually emptiness, until eventually, in the subtlety of our own mind, in single point of concentration, with the subtlety of our laser-like analysis, we are actually counteracting at the subtlest level these misconceptions after all the work in our daily life, life after life after life, until eventually the truth is evident to us. The truth becomes completely clear. Not truth made up by somebody, not dogmatic truth, not truth you have to force down your throat, but the truth of how things exist. And Buddha is either right or Buddha is either wrong. It's not moralistic. We're talking practical here. So if Buddha is right, and we learn to prove it to be true, and then we've internalized all these views, we have removed from our mind utterly and completely, never to be returned, the misconceptions. That's when you're Buddha. That's when you're enlightened. And what causes the misconceptions to go is the conviction of the correct conceptions, the conviction of the valid conceptions, of the reality of impermanence, karma, bodhicitta, the mind, delusions, virtues, non-physical, blah, 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 emptiness. Buddha might be wrong, but you've got to start somewhere with your hypothesis. This is the work we have to do. So delusions have no intrinsic, because they're not in sync with reality, they can be removed. You can't really remove, okay, put it this way, 1 + 1 is 2 is just a concept. Can you remove it from your mind? Yes, you can forget it. But if it's true, if it's a fact, you can't remove it. Facts are how things are. It's how things are, thusness. This is what they say, you know. So let's go into this point that Nancy brought up, which is such a is the essence of it. Like I said, like we've been all talking, because we only think we're the body in our culture, and we only think we're the brain. We only think, you know, we've got this level of mind, conceptual and sensory. That's what we posit as existing in the scientific model. Of course, there are discussions these days, all these marvelous discussions with His Holiness about what is real and what is not, which is fantastic, you know. What is the mind? All these things. It's good. So the mind has got this incredibly subtle levels, and the Buddha would tell us for many, many, many lifetimes, we've programmed our mind with ego grasping, attachment, anger, and all the others, which is why they're so automatic, which is why they're so instinctive. So we have to do sort of like unpacking. We have to unpack these virtual instincts. So the first level we exist at is the physical. So like I said, the moment now, in general, this is in our world, in our lives, in our world with the materialist model, we in general can see that we only really start to pay attention to the emotional pain, to the anger, the depression, the anxiety. We only really start to pay attention to it when it gets to the level of the physical, when it expresses itself at the grosser level. So that, you know, Will Smith's a good example. He clearly had anger in his mind. He clearly must have disliked Chris Rock in the past, probably talked about him behind his back, didn't think he's a dirty mouth guy, you know, doesn't like him. He probably, I mean, all these things. So anger's in his mind, it's there, and he knows it. He knows it. He expresses it to his family, but not in public. But suddenly conditions arose, and because he hadn't, like all of us, controlled his body and speech, he knew he was angry, but it came vomiting out with such force. But probably, like I said, like he was more shocked than everybody else. This is exactly how we are. And then, of course, it's become naked and evident to himself and everybody else that he had anger in his mind. So also because we have such powerful instinct to be approved of, this is what must be so shattering for poor Will, the whole, what, millions of people now are all discussing him, and he's now being thrown out. I mean, the devastation of that one, of not being approved of, is just beyond shattering, because most of us, with our ego grasping, spend most of our lives desperately hiding our negativity, not from ourselves, of course, but from everybody else. We can't bear it because we want to be seen in a good light. So that it's shattering to express in public. So of course, when we got bad behavior, like in my life, I had bad behavior. And I was sort of arrogant and thought, well, I don't care. I can do what I like. I mean, it's absurd, you know? So you're naked to other people. We can't bear that. The pain of it is unbearable. But as we only notice, I'm getting the main point, we only notice our own anger, attachment, jealousy, depression when the body feels it. So like I said, remember the Vajrayana model, it's so delicious. We have this subtle mind is actually called the mental states. Our mental states, conceptuality is much subtler than sensory. The grosser level is sensory. The subtle level is mental. We still experience it in day to day, but it's a subtle level of cognition. So those mental states are all coursing through these 72,000 subtle channels in our body, inextricably linked to their different wind energies. It's just the way the universe is. So whatever, you know, so then we only notice, so those wind energies. So even if the thoughts are strong, then the wind energies get disturbed. That's why in your mind, you're disturbed. You can't stop thinking about that person. You're so angry with them. You haven't expressed it out of your speech yet. But even when you don't, even though you're thinking all these angry thoughts, you still don't really realize you're angry because you're so involved in it. And then suddenly they vomit out your mouth. Then you notice. So our trouble is we only notice it. That's why I always use that simple analogy. Please hear it. It's like you've never heard of car mechanics. You've never heard that you can monitor your car, you can notice the wheels wobbling, and before it gets serious, you can have maintenance. And that means, and I mean, think about the road, all the roads, the billions of cars on the planet. In this country, let's say, most wheels don't fall off because we have maintenance. It's such a dumb example, but it's really profound. But why all these mental breakdowns of human beings? Why depression so bad? Why killing ourselves, killing each other, angry, raging, crazy, wars, violence? Why? Because we don't look at our minds. We wait till it comes out the mouth and you've got a gun in your hand and you wonder what's going on. Because we don't pay attention, because we don't have the methods. We don't have maintenance of our mind. Hear this point. This is what Buddha is giving us. Even if we don't realize emptiness, even if you don't get bodhicitta, even if you don't get single point of concentration, I don't care. Just to have an ability to be aware and authentic enough and courageous enough to want to see your mind before it vomits out the mouth, to see your mind before you are inert in bed with depression, to see your mind before you do what you do with your body and speech. This is sublime level of practice, and it just takes time. So all we can do is one step at a time. Start with controlling your body and speech. That's why living in vows is absolutely the most stupendous level of practice you can imagine. You know, the habits in the vows, we don't take a vow not to badmouth somebody. We don't take a vow, you know, we do in the 10 non-virtues. We don't take a vow not to get depressed. We don't take a vow not to, you know, eat too much cake. We take the vows of at least the heaviest actions. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't jump on the wrong partner, and try and control your sensory energy by maybe not having intoxicants. So these are the grossest level, but the most evident level of what people do to harm others, isn't it? So having vows, this is why vows are so amazing, such a technique to help us work on our mind. The 24 hours a day you're keeping vows, Buddha says, 24 hours a day that you're living in a vow not to kill, even when you don't think about it, even while you're sleeping. The vow is so stupendous, so powerful, that enables, it's like putting atomic bombs under the habit to kill and creating merit 24 hours a day. So killing is the grossest level of harming with the body, isn't it? But if you're radically controlling killing, then it goes without saying you're radically controlling other things of your body. If you're not lying, at least you're purifying that negative habit. You're helping purify the other habits of the mind. So you can't get ahead of the game without, what Buddha would say this. Lama Zopa says just being good is not enough. To do this job, it's a bit like, and I'll use the example again, it's like going to Roger Federer, please show me how to play tennis. And you're 50 pounds overweight, can't hardly hold a racket. And of course, he's not going to get you to play tennis immediately. He will get you to do the preliminary practices. He will get you to go and do some push-ups and jogging and lose 50 pounds and go on a diet and learn to get fit and all these things. Why? Because you're not ready even to pick up a racket. Well, that's what living in vows does. That's what all the preliminary practices of controlling your body and speech and living in vows and doing your practices of purification practices every day and doing your, creating merit practice, visualizing the Buddha, saying mantra. They have the function of purifying your mind, of preparing your mind, of priming your mind so that it makes it easy to play tennis. It makes it easy to work on your mind. It makes it easy to be your own therapist. So this is why part of our practice has to be those components. There's logic to it psychologically, but because we're so used to hearing the typical Tibetan Indian style of talking, and it's not the way we construct things, we've got to get past that. We've got to get past all the so-called rituals and the so-called religious sound and just understand the logic of it, psychological logic of it. Because if there is not psychological logic, don't do it. It's a load of rubbish. That's a fact. So we need to learn slowly to be conscious of our thoughts before they become emotional. That's actually really advanced, but that's the job. So then that's why every day you do your practice, every day you do your visualization, you do your mantras, you do this, you do the Buddha, you do your prostrations. This is all priming your mind. And then you do, even if it's like I always say, 5 minutes in the morning of just simply watching your mind or watching the breath, what you're doing, the technique is called shamatha. The goal in the long term is concentration. Worry about that. Immediately the benefit is because you're stepping out of your head for 5 minutes, because you're watching the boring old breath, because you're just merely observing the thoughts without analysis. You're practicing the skill of stepping away from yourself. So you bring that to bear in your daily life. Most of the time, what are we absorbed in? Sensory activity, driving the car, doing this, even if it's helping people, take care of the kid, give the pill to somebody. We're doing things with our body and speech. That's what life consists of, which means we're involved in the external world, which means we're focusing on those activities. We know our mind never stops. We know the thoughts are going 1,000 thoughts a second, they even say in modern psychology. Buddha agrees. But because they're small and they're chatting, we don't pay attention. So that's the skill we have to keep learning more and more wisely, more and more brilliantly. Catching these thousands of thoughts. And it's not an easy job because they go so quickly. So that's why back to the example of let's distinguish between attachment and love. A classic example of one delusion and one virtue, virtually mixed together in most of our experiences, in most of our relationships, so virtually mixed together, it's as if they're one thought. But they're utterly different, as we say in England and Australia. They're like chalk and cheese. They look the same, but they're utterly, profoundly different in their nature. So attachment is this I-based, fear-based, neurotic, tense, distorted, hungry, emotional hunger, coming from an assumption I'm nothing, that's emotionally hungry, that over-exaggerates the deliciousness of something, that hankers after it, that gets it. So there's Fred. Hunger, the hunger in us is enormous, and that's because of this fractured sense of a separate self. The assumption I'm not enough. That's the main thing of the ego. I'm not enough. The stronger the ego grasping, the less value we have, the more empty we feel, the more we're hungry for something else. So then you're hungry for Fred. And then what that attachment is doing, it's working every second in your mind, is over exaggerating his deliciousness. It makes you as blind as a bat. You only see the good things. And that's why and then it triggers very, very, very delicious feelings. So it's like in heaven. Being in love is the most heavenly feeling on the planet. But it's like a mental illness because you're grotesquely over exaggerating the deliciousness of that person. You don't see a single fault. Everything is shining like divine, is just vibrating deliciousness. And all you want is contact with that object. That's attachment at the grossest level for an object, you know. So you're as blind as a bat. Now, along with that, fortunately, and this is our saving grace, you also have the virtue called love, affection, another one called compassion. If you have those as well, then you're going to have a reasonable relationship. The more attachment and the less virtue, the more nightmare, the more suffering, the more anger, the more jealousy, the more resentment, the more bitterness, and you'll be surprised you kill each other, yourself or him, you know. So our saving grace is our virtues. But we assume when we say in love, we think it's called love. Now, this is an interesting point. When you are attached to whether it's to your baby, your beautiful divine baby, it's not being sarcastic, it's just how it is. When you confuse it with love, this is the classic, typical, obvious mistake we make. So it's such a good analysis to do. So the thing is, when you've got attachment, it triggers, this is the tragedy, this is why it makes it so difficult for us. It triggers very happy feelings. Now, happy feelings are neither virtue nor non-virtue. The word feelings, another whole discussion. The word feeling is in the third category of states of mind, and we only have three kinds. It's not virtue or non-virtue. It's quite separate, but we just muddle them all up. You either have a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or a neutral feeling. Well, let's forget the neutral. In our daily life, if you want to track your, feelings internally, feeling not meaning an emotion. It's a different use of a term. It's a very precise use. It's either referring to a happy feeling or an unhappy feeling, happiness or unhappiness, pleasure or displeasure. There's different synonyms. So we only have those two. So if you tracked your day internally, like a little graph, you wake up in the morning, unpleasant, unpleasant. Then you get a bit pleasant, 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 very pleasant, very pleasant, very pleasant, very pleasant, unpleasant, unpleasant. And of course, what will trigger those pleasant and unpleasant is meeting the boyfriend, meeting the chocolate cake, meeting the red light. They're the external events. They trigger the internal. So we tracked ourselves internally, pleasant or unpleasant. So of course, all we want is the pleasant. Now it happens to be that attachment, when it's running rampant in the mind, it triggers the wind energies and it triggers extremely pleasant feelings in the body. We know that, extremely pleasant feelings. So, of course, we only want those pleasant feelings. So then, of course, therefore, and because illogically, we assume, attachment assumes that Fred is the actual cause of those pleasant feelings, but he's not. He's just a trigger. He's just a trigger for those pleasant feelings. But that's why we're like a vampire clinging to Fred, because we believe totally that Fred presence of Fred, the sight of Fred, the touch of Fred, that's the cause, the main cause of these pleasant feelings. That's why, that serial killer I mentioned, I remember since a tiny boy, he got pleasant feelings when he tortured creatures. Now, of course, he didn't want to tell anybody because that's monstrous. We don't understand why. It's because of habit from past lives. So he got very pleasant feelings. So, of course, logically, he got the pleasant feelings because he tortured. That's why he kept torturing. Of course, he had to keep it secret. No one likes that. So this misconception of where pleasant feeling comes from is one of the major causes of our suffering in samsara. So anyway, when you're attached to Fred, it triggers incredibly pleasant feelings. So naturally, we assume Fred is the cause of the pleasant feelings. So then it is easy to want Fred to be happy. That's the definition of love. Love is, may you be happy. That's the meaning of love. It's a virtue, not in the negative one. It's got nothing to do with attachment. Love is a virtuous state of mind. Love is a delight in the happiness of someone else. So it's when you're in love with somebody, when you have attachment, it's easy to want them to be happy because you feel so good, and you will do anything to keep that person. You will do anything to make them happy because that, attachment's got a vested interest. Attachment and love are totally, completely different states of mind, but we completely not just mix them, we conflate them. So this is the analysis we have to do. This is the analysis we have to do, to distinguish between them. So if there is some love and kindness and patience and generosity and forgiveness and compassion in your relationship, good. But if it's contingent upon attachment, that's when people in the West say codependent and all that rubbish, It is better than nothing to have that love and compassion, but it's contingent on attachment. Therefore, it's kind of polluted, and it won't last because the minute he cheats on you, the love and compassion are turned off like a tap. So they're not that stable, Maybe the love of a mother for her child who rejects her is a bit deeper than the love for your ex-husband. I mean, mothers tend not to give up loving their child, even when the child rejects them. So this is the job we have to do to distinguish between attachment and love. For example, just one example, In other words, as I always say, the precision and clarity and depth of analysis we know we need to employ to be a good musician, a good carpenter, is exactly the level of clarity and precision and depth of analysis that we need to be our own therapist. It's not just closing your eyes and being cosmic, that's why we've got to study this stuff because it's quite technical. And then you internalize that and it becomes real for you. Just like studying music becomes second nature. It's in the details, And then we can mold our mind. And what gives us confidence, as I said, is the logic. If you've heard the logic, that misconceptions can be removed from the mind by buying into and proving the correct conceptions. That's what makes them go away. Merely believing something is simply not enough. This is something that can't be stressed enough. And often we're just intellectually lazy. We believe in karma. We believe in these things because we like them. It's not enough. It's too unstable. Any questions? Any questions at all? No, okay, no worries. Yes, Mary Jo, darling, talk to me. Yes, sweetheart. I think you have to unmute yourself, darling. Unmute, Mary Jo.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, sweetheart, yes.
So regarding love and attachment and sex, it seems that sex is tricky because sometimes when it's very pleasurable, it makes us think that we must love this person.
That's right. Exactly. That's right,
But
Mary.
it can be tricky.
Right.
It can be tricky. Yeah.
No, okay, now put it this way. As I said before, when when the pleasure is triggered, we all like pleasant feelings. The mind is very open, isn't it? The mind is very open. And so that object, that divine person whom you have contact with, who is triggering this enormous pleasure inside you, if you know, I mean, if you're just greedy for sex, you don't care about the object. You won't even see them as nice. You'll just get the sex and say goodbye, you know. But if there is some relationship there and there is some affection in the relationship, because your mind is so intensely open when the mind is pleased, then of course the person will look divine. And of course you will only want them to be happy, but not always. But if there is affection there, so that it is still love, Mary, but because it's contingent upon the person doing what your attachment wants. In other words, if this person suddenly starts beating you up, the love would instantly stop. So there is love there. There is the wish they be happy, but it's very, as Lama Zopa says, it's unstable. It's contingent upon your attachment getting what it wants. That's why we have to see the distinction. That's why I said, like a mother, my mum, I know she never stopped loving her 7 children till the day she died. And we all went through the typical process of being, of rejecting our mother and hating our mother and blaming our mother. She never stopped. I know that as a fact. She never stopped wanting us to be happy. That's typical for mums, I think. Although, of course, there's attachment there too. But certainly there was love there. There's no doubt. So that's when we can see. But usually when it comes to relationships, the love we do have is unstable, as the way Lama Zopa puts it. It's unstable. It's based on attachment. So you're absolutely right. Yeah, that's why it's so tricky, because these are we so hungry for pleasant feelings, and this is not a virtue or a non-virtue. It's just the way the universe is. It's just the way that we're constructed, But the tragedy is, as the Buddha's pointing out, we make the mistake of thinking that Fred and the chocolate cake are the main cause of the happy feelings, which is why we keep doing them. And that's why the torturer or the fisherman, because of their past habit due to karma, they think the fishing and the torturing is the cause of the happy feelings. So then they keep doing those actions. That's the tragedy. So to start to analyze logically what is the actual cause of happy feelings, and this is where it's very shocking. Any moment of pleasant feelings that you have in a day, each one of those is the fruit of a seed you have planted from doing a virtuous action or having a virtuous thought in the past. So literally, a moment of pleasure is the fruit of a moment of virtue. Could be from 27,000 lifetimes ago. So if you've got a bunch of virtuous seeds in your bank vault, every second that you get anything good that happens, including a pleasant feeling, including a person saying something nice to you, including having money in the bank, including any of the results of past actions, that's the fruit of virtue. That's the actual fruit of virtue. So the actual cause of happy feelings is virtue. Not cake, not boyfriends. And this is the big part to understand. I mean, it's highly technical how it works. And it's rather tragic, isn't it? That, like, say, always use that example of that little boy who was a fisherman. The second he, there he was, born as a human being, which is the fruit of non-killing. One of his non-killing karmic seeds was triggered. He got a human mummy. The second, he had all these tendencies in his mind. He was a very nice boy, kind, loving, but he had a tendency to kill from having killed in the past, which tragically he hadn't purified because he hadn't lived in vows of not killing. That's the worst result of habits. The third is the experience similar to the cause. Later on in his life, he got killed. He died young, scuba diving. But anyway, he had the tendency to kill. Now, that didn't get triggered until he met the fishing scenario. He didn't want to kill his mother or the ants or the dogs. He had to wait till he met fishing, which was a particular habit he had. And the second he saw fishing, it was like it triggers the memory. It's like that's what, when you meet certain people or things, it feels familiar. It's because you've got the karma from having done them before. So clearly he had a karmic tendency to kill. He met the scenario called fishing. And what happens is this is like it triggers the memory. You don't call it that. And suddenly, instantaneously, it triggers intensely good feelings. And those pleasant feelings, the extent of the good feelings we experience based upon what triggers it, is the extent of the habit of having done that action in the past. So if you've got pleasant feelings when you see people happy, it's because you've practiced virtue. If you have pleasant feelings when you see fishing, it's because you've killed in the past. So he had very, very pleasant feelings. And then the next millisecond, what is triggered after the pleasant feelings, this is the 12 links, is pleasure. Is attachment. And attachment kicks in and then writes a really divine story that makes the whole scenario look unbelievably perfect. So then naturally, he only wants to keep killing because he assumes that fishing is the cause of his pleasant feelings. And then the worst tragedy is the more the pleasure, the more the attachment, the more he is as blind as a bat and can't see the suffering of the fish. That's the worst part of attachment, when we harm others. So anyway, questions. Yes, Marka, and then Hillary. Marka, what's your question, darling?
I appreciate in your talk that you're sort of making this distinction between love and attachment.
That's right.
And because for me, like, just being introduced to the Buddhist viewpoint, it's been really helpful to kind of watch situations and think of it as attachment. And then the Buddhism tells me, or I just take from it, well, practice compassion and loving kindness.
That's right.
And I'm thinking like, okay, here's these teenagers and they're, getting it on and they're getting together, right? And suddenly the boy says, I love you. And that's all he has to say because
That's
there's
right.
such a charge with that word.
That's right, exactly.
So I'm really appreciating,
That's right.
thinking about
That's-
these.
That's
These
it, Mike. That's right. And this is the fundamental job. This is the one of distinguishing between the virtues and the negative ones. And this is a massive one because we can all see in this point, this is like, forget about attachment to physical things. The deepest attachment, as we've all talked about, the deepest attachment is to being approved of. So the second that boy says, I love you, I mean, you're completely gone. You've lost the plot. You're in the palm of his hand. He can do what he likes with you now because we're so hungry to be approved of. That's the tragedy in our relationships, isn't it?
Yeah. I have a second question that's unrelated.
Yeah.
I've seen like with the Tibetans, like if someone is parting for a journey or whatever, and there's an elder, there's a grandfather or grandmother, and the person's going to depart for a journey, and they kind of touch foreheads.
That's right. Yes.
Like is that like?
It's their form of a hug.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's a respectful hug. Usually, an elder or your lama would do that to you. You wouldn't hug your lama. You would show this. It's a respectful way. It's showing a way of affectionate respect or respectful affection.
Okay, and so that would be more like the Tibetan custom rather than the namaste with the hands at the heart.
Yeah, exactly. It's very Tibetan. Yes, exactly. Very Tibetan style. Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's lovely meaning, isn't it? Very,
yeah.
Very, yeah.
So in the East, then, say, what's the take on hugging?
Well, I just think it's a very common habit we've got. I mean, not every culture does it. And certainly don't do it in public. Some cultures would never do it in public. We can see in American style, Australian style, we're very public about it. But I remember His Holiness Dalai Lama. He was wonderful. He's become very modern. He responds in a very modern way. He acts like a modern person. It makes people very happy. And so he hugs people now. He even hugs Tibetans. And in the beginning in Tibet, you wouldn't even look at the Dalai Lama. If you have a meeting with him, you'd go in with your head down and he might bonk you on the head with a peacock feather, and that's about it. You'd never dare to look in the eye of somebody whom you revere so hugely, which is very respectful. But now he hugs people, and Tibetans are so moved by it because he's becoming a modern person. It's wonderful. So you just adjust your habit, you just adjust your behavior, to the culture that you live in, isn't it?
Right. Well, thanks.
Good.
Yeah, myself personally, I'm not a hugger. Like I would not hug people, and then it gets into a whole little interchange, right?
I know that's right. People, because we're so needy to be needed, and if you don't hug, people think you don't like them. It's just different styles, isn't it? It's different styles, isn't it?
Yeah. But anyways, I think it's good just to slow down and be in my center and be in my truth.
Right. That's it, Marka. Exactly, darling. Well done. Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you. Okay, Hillary, what's your question, darling?
Thank you, Venerable. Well, so I'm wondering if you could maybe speak on a situation that I'm going to have to go through this year, which is that I'm on a medication for a neurological condition that they are no longer prescribing because it's terrible for the mind. And I have to detox off of it. And so it creates depression, anxiety, fatigue, suicidal ideation. So there's a chemical storm going on in the mind until you're off of this.
The chemical storm's in the brain, but not the mind.
I'm sorry. Yeah, right in the brain, of course.
Sure.
And I've been reading about people's experience, and it sounds horrific.
Mhm.
And so it reminds me a little bit of, I guess, about reading in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, when you see these things, not to believe them, even as terrible as they might appear, or as beautiful as they might appear.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's a good point, because, but I mean, have a look at what humans can do. People get off heroin, people give up cigarettes, people give up in terrible drugs, and we can do it. So you have to be brave, Hillary. Get support, know and have the Buddhist view of the mind. Don't, and know that it's possible. I think, look at what humans can do. Look at people who give up heroin, cigarettes, alcohol. They go through torture. But if you have good support and you have the Buddhist view of your mind and you persevere and you know there's light at the end of the tunnel, be courageous, but have good support, Hillary. You get my point here?
I do.
Because the physical does impact upon the mental, but in the end, the mental is the more powerful. But that is not, it's not true for us at the moment, but we can learn to make it more powerful. So I think those examples are very marvelous. People can do it. Humans have done incredible things in giving up, giving up intense suffering, giving up intense addictions and intense things, do you understand?
I do, yeah.
So be brave, darling. Have good support, take yourself carefully, do it one step at a time, and understand your mind, and be brave, and do practices, do medicine, Buddha, do all these things. And maybe even, find a good Tibetan doctor and take herbal things. I mean, they can all help. Up to you to find people. I mean, there must be some around, I don't know. Where do you live? I forget, Hillary.
I live in Baltimore, near Washington.
Okay, I think you should look up to, because Tibetan medical doctors, Tibetan medicine works on the subtler physical energies, can really help your, for example, there's a person I know who's got, she's had intense anxiety, like out of control, berserk mind, absolutely berserk, out of control, but now on Tibetan medicine for several months, and really a radical change. You can see the radical change in her, So these things, because it works on the wind energies. The Tibetan herbal medicine works on the subtle physical energies, which impacts upon your mind. It's a very logical relationship. So do what you can, find out. There are more and more Tibetan doctors around.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Hillary. Yes, Alona.
Hi, Venerable. Thank you for your teaching.
Good.
Hi. I have a question about the vows. I watch myself, and I follow, I live in my vows. I love them. But now, my family in Ukraine, and my mom decided to stay there. She doesn't want to leave. And, lots of people talk to me about it. And now I don't want to tell people anymore that my mom is there, because I lie deliberately that say, okay, they're in safety, because I don't want to deal with everybody's opinion about it, because people just, it's overwhelming.
That's right. Exactly.
Is it? But I'm so aware.
What do you mean you love? Give us an example. Give us an example, Alona. Give an example of a scenario. So you mean, in other words, people who know you're from Ukraine, right?
Yes.
You live in Sweden, right?
Yes.
The people who know this, what's an example of a scenario? Give me an example of a scenario.
My mom,
No, like a person talking to you. How would it come up that you would have to lie? Give me an example of a scenario.
They would come to me and say, how is your family? Are they safe?
And what do you
say?
You say they're fine.
I say, my thoughts in my head, no, they're not safe, but I say deliberately, yes, they are safe.
That's okay. I mean, or you just say they're fine, they're doing fine. That's not lying. Saying they're doing fine. What? That's not lying, Alona. You have to be literal. Of course, it's not safe living in a war zone, God almighty. But all you can say is they're doing fine, and then, and don't go anywhere. That's not lying, darling. It's just being skillful. Do you see my point?
Yes.
Just be skillful with your words. I agree, your reasoning is very sensible. Everybody loves to give an opinion. It's not their business. So just don't invite those opinions. I agree with you completely. But you can be skillful how you, don't worry about you're not breaking your vow. Of course you're not breaking your vow, darling. Everybody, I mean, you see my point. Just use your words
Yes.
wisely. That's all.
Yes,
Very
I
simple.
understand.
Good.
Yeah.
Good, darling.
Yeah.
So how is your mum? How is she doing it? Is she doing well mentally? She's managing or what?
Yes, she is. When war started, I actually begged her, and she temporarily went to our relatives to Moldova, and she stayed there. But her husband didn't want to follow, and then she decided to go back. It was her decision, and
Okay.
I asked her to come to me to Sweden, but she decided not to, and I begged. But now I respect her decision. It's her
No,
life.
darling. I mean, millions of people are still living in Ukraine, right? People live
Yeah.
through war zones. So you just love her and take care of her and say some medicine Buddhas and pray that she's okay, darling.
Yeah, so I give up my idea of what I want. I just
Well,
love her for what she
that's
wants
exactly
and
right,
try
darling.
to help her from there.
And do practices. Pray to medicine Buddha, pray to Tara to protect her.
Yeah, because of these practices, I'm able to deal with that.
That's right, exactly.
Not dealing with what I want, but what's
That's
more
exactly right.
beneficial for
That's
them.
right. Exactly,
Yeah.
darling. Very good. Thank you,
Can
Alana.
I ask you one more
Yes,
question,
please,
Venerable?
yes.
It's about the mind. You know, I understand context of the mind when we discuss them, and I can see when, like, especially delusions arrive in my mind, and I work with them. But like every time I hear mind is non-physical, I was thinking, what is it then? And it's the energy, right? Is it around our body, or I want to picture it somehow to grasp this.
I understand that.
What
I know. I think
is
it's hard to do. You can't grasp it. I mean, it's what's difficult. Of course, it's difficult, you know. But if we can just take the view, it's not physical. You can't taste it or touch it or smell it. But we know, you see, this is the point. We know we can feel the presence of mind. You know, you walk into a room where people have been fighting. They're not saying one word. Think about this. Anger can't be touched or tasted or smelt or seen, but you can feel the presence of that violent, that angry mind, can't you? Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Well, that's an indication that as our minds get more subtle, we can literally see the minds of others. We know what they're thinking. So mind is very powerful. It's cognition itself. So just, don't try, I mean, you can't picture it. But it's cognition itself. So we can feel the presence of mind. That's even us gross people. So when you're clairvoyant, you can literally know with your mind what other people are thinking. You can see long distances. You can see their future. You can see their past. Your mind is so brilliant, you know, so sharp and clear. That's the best. I mean, it's all I can say is keep thinking of the qualities of the mind, you know.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good point. Thank you, darling. What else, people? What else, people? Nothing. Okay. So then, yeah, okay. So what we're basically saying is the Buddha's telling us that we're living at the grosser level of conceptuality. Conceptuality is the gross level of mental consciousness. We've got the subtle levels, as I've been discussing just then with Alona. And when we get shamatha, we can really access those subtle levels. And as we keep progressing more and more powerfully, it's like we can expand our consciousness. Because this is an interesting point. You can think of, I think of if mind is not physical, then actually it can't finally be confined by space or time or matter. But right now it is. Our mind is like literally stuck in this bag of bones. The sensory consciousness is dominant, dependent upon a body, the really gross level. And then we have all the thoughts and feelings and emotions, but we're only in touch with a very gross level of them. So it's like we are limited by this body. We can't see past our own nose. We don't remember most of today. We don't remember most of anything of our other lives. It's like a joke. We can't see very far, can't hear very far. We're very limited because of ego grasping, because of the primordial habits from lifetime after lifetime of buying into all these misconceptions. They narrow us. They narrow our mind. And we can see this. Look, when you're dominated by attachment or jealousy or anger or depression, it's like your sense of me is about as big as a pinhead. You can't feel or see anything else. Your own feeling of you're overwhelmed by your own pain and your own views of the universe. We're so limited. We can see this. So as we progress in our practice, you could say, as we lessen delusions, as we grow virtues, we literally expand our consciousness. Literally. So when you have some sense, I mean, Lama Yeshe talks about in Mahamudra, he talks about some of the qualities we accomplish when we get shamatha. And of course, one is literally called clairvoyance. I mean, of course, it's like mystical in the West, but this is totally fitting with the Buddha's view. Your mind is so subtle, you know, that you can see the past and the future and the minds of others. But as Lama Yeshe says, we've all got a grosser level of this clairvoyance, which is like this intuition, this sense that you know that your grandmother's suffering and she's in another town, you know, the feeling of what, even just this sense of what people are feeling is sort of a grosser level of a grosser level of being aware of other people's minds. But you know yourself, if you're overwhelmed by anger, let's say, and you're with a crowd of people, you don't even notice they are there because you're so overwhelmed by your own junk, your own suffering, your own pain. When you're overwhelmed by your own depression, you're not aware of anything. Your mind is completely conflated, completely constricted. You know, we know this. This is the pain of the deluded mind, you know. This is the function of the ignorance, the root delusion, the ignorance. And this, of course, anyway, this is just the suffering of the ignorance. The mind is so limited. So as we progress, we lessen the delusions and we grow the virtues. We are literally expanding our mind. But we're also, is what's encouraging, we're also literally increasing our happiness, increasing our joy. This is something so simple. You know, some people you know who are really kind and loving. They're always joyful. They're just joyful. They beam, they're happy, they smile. Some people are like that because they've mostly got virtue, not so much non-virtue. So this is a very simple point, and it's kind of revelation when we hear it. Happy feelings come from virtue. Unhappy feelings come from non-virtue, from delusions. But it's too hard for us to hear this. It sounds like judgment, you know. In other words, as we progress by lessening delusions and growing the virtues, we literally get happier. Look at His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Anybody with a half a brain can see that this man's happy. He's just happy. He cracks jokes. 60 years, 70 years, he hasn't stopped working for the sake of Tibetans and the whole world. He hasn't stopped and does not stop for 1 second working to benefit the world, working to alleviate the suffering of Tibetans. You'd think he'd be exhausted and drained and fed up by now. No, he's still a happy fellow. Cracking jokes, happy. So when the mind is not non-virtuous, the mind is naturally happy. We should really be, it's not easy to develop it, but this is the point, you know. So the job to be done is to distinguish between the delusions, the attachment, the ego grasping, the attachment, the aversion, the attachment to reputation, attachment to being approved of, attachment to pleasure, attachment to our comfort zone. All of these attachments is vast, you know. And then aversion and despair and depression and anger that comes when attachment doesn't get what it wants, and all the other dramas, you know. So that means we have to learn to listen to the roommates. I call them all my roommates. There are thousands of roommates in there, all chatting away. And that's the job we have to do every day. Listening to those thoughts, trying to distinguish the positive ones from the negative ones. So there's two methods, really. We've got to employ both depending on the situation for dealing with them. One is, this is the one of just letting them be. This is hard because they're shouting so loud. When when you're in the midst of those paranoid thoughts and you're convinced that someone doesn't like you, you're convinced of what she said and he's rejected you, and you can hear these stories. You're writing this novel, isn't it? And it's an unstoppable novel, isn't it? We know this. Unstoppable. And you're so involved in the story, you're in the very center of the story. So one practice, which is hard, is to let the thoughts come like uncontrolled thoughts, but try not to buy into them. Just try to allow them. This is one method. It's hard. It's really hard because we're so immersed in them. Try to allow them just to go, come and go. Just listen and just let them come and go, and don't buy into them. The other one, of course, is if you can do that, is actually be involved in it and then argue with them, debate with them, prove that they're wrong. Whichever one. Sometimes when the delusions, the paranoia, the anger, the hurt, the anxiety are so strong, you can't argue with them. It's too intense. So you try to step back. You try just to stay steady, stay stable, and allow them to come and go. And the tiny part of your mind saying, it's all happening, I know that, Robina, but don't believe this story. This is incredibly powerful, incredibly necessary. Have one tiny part of your wisdom saying, it's okay. It's okay. Try not to believe, Robina. It's okay. It'll pass. But the more you buy into them, then you increase the story. And then within a week, you've gone mad. You've lost your plot completely, But if you allow them to come and go, you'll be surprised. You have a good sleep and tomorrow morning you're okay. Really, because you didn't buy into them. This is huge. So that means we have to have courage to allow the thoughts to be there, not to panic and think this is wrong, I shouldn't be this, I'm bad, I'm hopeless. Not like that. Don't comment. Allow them. It's just some karma ripening, some garbage ripening. Allow them to come and go. That's really, and have a tiny part of your wisdom holding on, like Hillary and trying to go through some suffering, giving up this drugs, right? You've got to really have this courage to know it's okay. It'll pass. And don't believe the stories. It's not true, Robina. Let it be. You're believing it. You're hearing it. You're immersed in the story. You're convinced that he doesn't like you. You're convinced he's thinking this and that. You're convinced he did this and that. And this is what we eventually just can't distinguish between facts and fiction. That's why we go mad, Just kind of ride the waves of it and try not to buy into the thoughts, and then just relax, try and say mantras on top. It's another good technique. Just say mantras on top, and just stay steady like a big storm. Walk through that storm, not believing it. And then, it'll go a lot more quickly. Wake up in the morning, have a good sleep. You wake up and your mind will be calm. But if you buy into the thoughts and you believe they're true, then it keeps growing and growing until you lose it, until you lose the plot, And then you'll burst out the words to your daughter, and you did this and you did that and you did this and you did that, and all the trouble has started, It's not easy. The other one is if it's a bit mild, you grab the thoughts before they're too emotionally strong and you argue with them. You use your wise roommates to argue with these crazy roommates, Wisdom argues with the attachment, or with the anger, with the anxiety. You argue with them because they're not valid conceptions. This is huge. This is quite huge, Other times you just try to have virtuous thoughts instead. Or if you really grab them when they're quite early, you just sort of shut up, Robina, and before you cut the conversation before it even starts. That's the best one. Eventually we get to that point. We just say shut up, and the thought was quiet. The sooner you catch them, the better, It's a full-on job. Like all jobs, it's exhausting in the beginning, but like any job, you get better. Tibetans would say, Tibetans have a lovely way of putting it. We say practice makes perfect. They've got a much nicer way of putting it. They say nothing ever gets more difficult with practice. I like that one. That's much better. In other words, nothing ever gets worse with practice. Nothing ever gets more difficult with practice. That's encouraging. I like that. Hello, Mary Jo. Yes, sweetheart.
Can you hear me?
I can.
So how in a similar way do you work with depression, depressive thoughts?
Same, Mary Jo, same. The tragedy is depressive thoughts are more subtle. They're not so volatile, are they? But they come from, it's like a buildup of negative thoughts, a buildup of aversion thoughts, like attachment. When the mind is a bit perky, when we're a little bit perky, when things are going nice, we're sort of a little bit perky, we're a little bit up, isn't it? It's quite pleasant. But then suddenly, when the mind starts to find fault and get upset and easily frustrated and hurt and offended and things go wrong, very mild, each moment of aversion is building up and it won't become volatile. I mean, for people who get depressed, it's usually not violent anger, but the aversion, we've got to catch the aversion thoughts when they're small and counteract them. So aversion means finding fault. Depression is just extreme aversion to yourself, and all you do is appear as an ugly, hopeless person, and now your mind is you are inert. So it's just a buildup of aversion thoughts. Anger is also a buildup of aversion thoughts, but they're more volatile and they're more shouting. But depressed thoughts are more subtle, because some people with depression don't shout and yell. So they're more kind of quiet. But it's also when things go wrong in the day, like just ordinary life, Mary Jo, attachment is this junkie that only wants everything to be pleasant. So when you get the meal you want, you get the green lights, the person smiles at you, the daughter rings and says, hello, mummy, lovely things happen. Then attachment is getting what it wants. And so we get all perky and happy, which is nice, but we don't catch it. And then suddenly the phone call doesn't come. Suddenly you break the cup while you're washing the dishes. Suddenly the pain in the knee. Suddenly things go even a little bit wrong. Then aversion arises. This shouldn't be the way it is. This is not right. This is not wrong. This is no good. I'm hopeless. And that builds up and it goes deeper and deeper until you can't get out of bed. So the expression of strong depression is when the body feels it. And that's, again, it's the same as before the words vomit out the mouth. Before you're inert in bed, we have to catch the thoughts and argue with them or let them pass. You see what I'm saying, Mary Jo? It's the same practice, just more subtle. Because aversion thoughts are very coming all the time. As soon as attachment doesn't get what it wants, we get annoyed, upset, irritated. They're mild aversion thoughts. So we've got to catch them. Then we counteract them. It's okay, Mary Jo. Everything's fine. So she doesn't ring. It's okay. Everything's okay. Yeah, the pain in the knee is a big drag, I know, but it's all right. I can handle it. So you kind of counteract with positive thoughts and you keep yourself buoyant, not in an artificial way, not pretending you're not upset. It's not like trying to be Pollyanna. It's catching the thoughts ever more subtly and then counteracting them with a more positive take on things. You understand, darling? I mean, this is subtle stuff, every second. Until we've got really good concentration, it really is, I mean, we're at the tip of the iceberg of this practice, but already that's fantastic. Already it's good, Or just say mantras on top. Put mantras on top. Things annoy, just put mantras on top. Mantras are very blessing for the mind and can really bless the mind and purify the mind, because the sound is mantra. Sound is the wind energy, and the purest sound is mantra. So by saying mantra, you're blessing the wind energy, and then you're blessing the mind connected to the wind energy. You're blessing your mind as well. So there's lots of these little techniques, Thank you, Mary Jo. What else, sweethearts? So all this work of counteracting the delusions, I mean, it all leads to counteracting the root delusion, of course. That's the subtlest work, isn't it? It leads to counteracting the view, the assumption that there is an intrinsic, separate, independent, real, concrete, set in stone, inherent me in here somewhere. That's when we really can radically change our minds, Someone had their hand up. Who was it? It went away again. There you go. Serena, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hello.
Hi, I'm from Istanbul.
Oh, good. Happy to see you.
Yes, thank you.
Good.
Yes. So it's my first time.
Oh, how interesting, Serena. Are you enjoying the talk or not?
A lot. Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, yes.
Good.
I had on Instagram last week as well with Berrak Yurdakul. Thanks to her, I met you.
Oh, good. Yes, that talk we did. Yes, on
Yes,
Instagram.
and I could follow you and catch this wonderful Zoom. So I'm very happy to do that.
Yes.
And just practicing
Good.
Buddha. I'm just very, very, very new to mindfulness. I'm trying to do every morning. I have a very busy, I'm working very hard. I have a very busy business life, let's say. I have my own brand. And so you feel mind, when you, how we need to keep your mind a little bit quiet and then be careful what you're thinking. It's a little bit harder on the business level because you need to think all the time next steps and then always not assumptions, but of course with factual things with people. And it's not very easy to keep the mindfulness during the day under the stress. So I'm just wondering, Is there a way to deal with that in the daily life? In
That's a really good point. Yes, Serena. Well, I think first of all, in general, whether you're working at home, taking care of your 9 children or running a business, it's the same job, really. You're dealing with the outside world. So the fundamental starting point for each one of us is the wish to control our body and speech, which means not to be unethical. So like with your children, let's say your 9 children, you try to behave nicely, you try to be wise, you deal with the dramas. So first have the strong feeling that how you present your body and speech is really important. So especially in business where you're dealing with other human beings and whatever your business is. So you're starting with a grounded feeling of having good ethics. So you don't want to lie, you don't want to manipulate people, you don't want to be angry, those things. So having that as a starting point for your day, and that will inform the way you behave in the day the best you can, and try and base your work on good ethics. I don't know how easy that is in Turkey. Maybe I don't know. I know in one country, I remember in Russia years ago, when I was there in the early 2000s, and we were doing refuge ceremony, and people were taking the vows, and there was a vow not to kill, not to steal, not to lie. And all these Russian guys, they were really serious about the lying and stealing because they don't pay taxes, because they don't trust their government, and therefore they lie. So they were really worried about that. So maybe, I don't know whether things are like that in Turkey, I've got no idea. But, have a good feeling of trying to be ethical, and then your behavior, because if you're dealing with business, you've got to deal with human beings, trying to have good behavior. That's a good start. Then your mind is more easy to manage if your behavior is good. You see my point?
Yes, definitely. Yes. Thank you so much.
I think that's a good start. The body and speech are the first level, That's what presents to others. So if you make that good, then it's easier for you to see your mind, isn't it? Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you
Good.
so much. Thanks a lot.
All right. I'm coming to Turkey next year.
Wow.
In February. I'll be coming in February.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm waiting for you.
Yes, I'll see you there.
Okay.
Good, Serena. Thank you, darling.
Thank
Who
you.
else has a question? Anybody else? Okay. So now, yeah, okay. So let's talk about, this is all. Yes, Mary Jo. Yes, darling.
I just had a little question before we go into something else. You mentioned about intuition. Is there any idea that intuition can grow into a stronger kind of a clairvoyance or something
that's the
like
point.
that?
That's the whole point, of course. That's what you get from practicing shamatha. Exactly. Lama Yeshe talks about this very clearly in Mahamudra. The capacity to get clairvoyance is coming as a natural result of getting single-pointed concentration. Absolutely, Mary Jo. There's no question.
Single-pointed concentration.
Yeah, that's the key. Yes.
Thank you.
So what we've done mostly is look at the wisdom wing aspect of looking for watching the delusions and all that. Now let's look a little bit from the compassion wing point of view, how to do the same job of molding our mind into the mind of a wise, virtuous person. Let's look at how we would apply the positive states of mind, how we would apply proactively, instead of anger, instead of jealousy, instead of attachment, how we'd proactively try to have the positive thoughts, to practice compassion, practice patience, practice forgiveness, practice love, these things. It's all the same work in the end. But sometimes the practice is to refrain from the negative and be quiet. And sometimes the practice is to proactively practice the virtuous, so it's all a question of our capacity. So you've got it, like say you're in a relationship, like the family, let's say, which is always where it's so volatile. The very first level, as I've been saying, like for Serena in her business life, at least you decide, I won't say those bad words. You control your speech. But then if it's appropriate, you'll even do more than that, and you will actively say something positive. Let's say you're with the family, and that's where all the dangers are. So maybe with your sister, you have always a problem. You're always fighting. So maybe your main practice in that family gathering is to control your mouth and don't open the mouth. Maybe you're feeling angry, you're feeling upset, but you keep your mouth shut. This is already a profound practice. But another whole level, if you're brave enough and she says something mean and you just laugh and say, oh, I understand, darling, I love you. To say something positive, say something loving, say something forgiving. Someone accuses you of doing something. You say, you're right, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. This is pretty profound. To actually actively say or do something positive, not out of passive aggression, but really actively kind and compassionate. That's pretty powerful. That's really powerful practice. I mean, one typical example I often use is, let's say we have problems with our mother. People seem to have problems with their mums, you know, and your mum's always dissatisfied and she's always complaining and always thinks you don't love her enough and you don't visit her enough and you don't ring her enough. This is very typical of mums, right? Isn't it? So the thing is, you know, let's say you decide you're going to see your mum once a week, or you're going to phone your mum once a week. Let's say. So half the time we do it out of guilt. Oh, I should do it. We feel bad if we don't ring mum, you know? This is very common. So the thing is, when we can decide, I think one of the most powerful things is to feel that we are in charge of our decisions. Acting out of guilt is like, I should do it. And then you feel all suppressed and you get upset and you get angry and you go to your mother's out of guilt and you come home feeling even more miserable. You kind of go crazy. Whereas if we can make a decision, yes, I'm going to go to see my mother once a week and I'm going to be there for 2 hours, and that 2 hours belongs to my mother. I belong to my mother for 2 hours and she can say and do exactly what she likes, and I'm going to accept it. Just making that decision will liberate you. Whereas if you go out of guilt, all this internal tension, and you'll fight with her and you resist it and you get upset and you go home and you gossip about her, you'll go crazy. So really the thing is acting out of decision. Make a decision. Make a decision. Okay, I'm going for 2 hours and I am hers for that 2 hours. And then you will be content. You will relax because you've made a decision. You are in control of your decision. But going out of guilt and shame and what people think of me, this is a nightmare. This is the nightmare. So it means having courage. Now, put it this way. Let's say you can't handle your mother. Well, then make a decision to not go to your mother and accept the criticism and accept what people think of you. But we mostly do neither. We are afraid not to go and we hate going. So both ways you're caught up in this prison of no decision and you go nuts, you know. So make decisions, own our decision, and then you feel clearer. Then you'll feel more relaxed. And then you can even be kind. This is molding your mind, I tell you. My goodness. Feeling in control of our choices, making the decision and owning it, either to stay, to go to see your mum once a week, or to not go. And you decide either way according to your capacity. So sure, some people cannot handle it. So don't go. Don't just go there and make a mess and make yourself more miserable and make them miserable. That's foolish. Which means, of course, we have to understand what guilt is. Guilt is like a nightmare, you know. Guilt is a symptom, the deepest symptom of ego grasping, the root delusion, this sense of a self, this concrete neurotic sense of a self. And guilt is really simply anger. That's all. But you're the object. I did this and I did that and I'm no good and therefore this and I'm bad and blah, blah, blah. And that's a very common voice in our head, a very typical roommate, you know, this anger towards ourselves. It manifests in many ways. In other words, guilt is anger, which over exaggerates the badness of something. And in this case, it's the badness of yourself. It's one of the worst things we have. It's one of our worst crimes against ourselves, I tell you. So then we've got to catch it. And this is such an instinctive response. We've got to catch it continuously and argue with it. So when we can see that all the delusions over exaggerate the status of something. In other words, the delusions paint a picture of the thing, the person, yourself, the event. Delusions paint a particular picture that exaggerates. So if an attachment is there, you paint a very lovely picture. You over-exaggerate the deliciousness of the person. Anger paints a picture of ugliness, paints a picture that shows the person as mainly ugly. So guilt is that, and that paints a picture of me as awful, bad, no good. I did this, I did that. So the thing is, I mean, there's a lovely saying among Christians, I like it. It says, don't criticize the sinner, criticize the sin. That's the precision and clarity we need for ourselves. That's why in the purification practice, the first step of regret, of owning responsibility, I did do that action, I did badmouth my mother, I did kick the dog, I did do that, I did cheat on my husband, owning it and saying I did do it, which is the first step. But then guilt would then say, and therefore I'm a bad person. You conclude that because I did that, I am therefore a bad person. No, I did do that, and that action's not so cool. So criticize the action. Don't identify the whole of yourself with that action. That's what we do. When Fred cheats on me, I say Fred is bad. No, the action was bad. It's a really major point. It's a really powerful point. It means being more precise. Because all the delusions over-exaggerate the status of something. So it's important to regret, to own responsibility. You see, our usual methods in the world is either to deny that I did something, to live in denial, to hide it, or to blame somebody, or to blame ourselves. Guilt, blame, or denial. They're the three ways we function. We blame somebody else, or I blame myself, or I deny it. These are the nightmare. So this option here is the fourth one. I did do that action. I did kick the dog. I did badmouth my mother. I did cheat on my husband. And then out of kindness to yourself, you know, out of your foolishness, out of your lack of clarity, out of your old habit, you did do it. And then you say, and this is in the practice of the 4 opponent powers, I regret having done that. And you're talking to yourself. I did do it, but I regret having done it because that sowed seeds in my mind that I don't want to continue. I don't want the future suffering. I don't want this habit. So it's kindness to ourselves. It's kindness to ourselves. It's appropriate. It's reasonable. You own it, which is painful. Because one of the major things when we do a negative action is we instinctively want to hide it. That's why we want to avert it, to blame, or we just eat up and sink it, destroy ourselves with it. But we want to hide it. If no one sees us do it, we think, oh, good, I got away with it. It's not meaningless. We have to own it, but don't exaggerate it. You did bad. I mean, this is where poor old Will, can you imagine Will Smith trying to own now responsibility for this action that millions of people saw him do? Unbelievably powerful, my God. And the reason you regret it is because you don't want this suffering. You are sick of suffering. It really is like compassion to yourself. We're not used to this one. We don't like to have this one. We just think it seems like soft, but it's incredibly powerful because we're human. We're a work in progress. Practice by definition is making mistakes and then learning from them. That's what practice means. So we have to be very humble and kind to ourselves. Then we can change easily. Then easily you can mold your mind. But if you don't own it, if you deny it, if you blame your other people or blame yourself, you just go, it gets deeper and deeper. The problem gets deeper and deeper. It's worse. You go crazy. So it's hard though, because ego doesn't want to own it. You know, the quicker you can catch a mistake, the quicker you can identify the problem, the more quickly you can solve it. But if you can't identify, and this is part of a problem seeing our minds, because the delusions go to very deep level. They've got subtler levels and grosser levels. All we can do is start with the grosser levels, isn't it? See the grosser mistake. And then as we progress in our mind, we see ever more subtle levels, ever more subtle, ever more subtle. And these are hard to see, you know. We often can see this with other people. We can see, isn't it? We're not even clairvoyant, but we can see their bad habits, but they can't see it. Because, you know, we deny. It's too painful to see the problem. It's too painful to see the mistake. So this takes courage. But we should be happy to see the mistake, because then we know what to be fixed. If you can't identify the problem, you can't solve the problem. So it takes courage to do that, but it's practical and it's kindness to ourselves, no question. The more quickly we can own responsibility, the more quickly we can change. We can mold our mind, you know. That's why these 4 opponent powers are so powerful psychologically. 1, you own responsibility, you regret. 2, you have compassion for the person you harmed. 3, you do the meditation and imagine purifying it. And 4, you make decisions to change according to your capacity. So intelligent, so practical psychologically. Don't think of it as religion, you know. What else, people? Any more questions? 2 o'clock. What? Nothing?
Nothing in the chat, Venerable.
Nothing. Okay, good. So again, try and remember, let's just look at the logic of this packaging of the teachings, the Lamrim, you know. Initially it's so strange to us, so kind of esoteric, so arcane, but it's just logical psychologically. The essence of the first level of practice, which as we know is the culmination of the first scope, which is to abide by the laws of karma, is to take, this is where you take responsibility, you know. Out of habit, we do this and say that. So the essence of that is controlling our body and speech, living in vows, making decisions to change, you know, that's the essence of it, the body and speech, very first level. Learn to harness like I said to Serena at work, learn to harness the behavior. This is huge practice. I mean, look at the consequences for Will, you know, just control his mouth. The whole problem was averted. Once you said those words, the words are out the mouth, you can't take them back. We know that. Okay, maybe we don't go around slapping each other, but we look at the words we say, you know. So controlling the words, and that already demands a lot of awareness. You know, you're controlling your words, but you're using your mind to control your words. You're deciding to control your words. That's then brings you to the deeper level, like Serena said, of then being the mindful of working on your mind. You've got to control the body and speech. If you can't control your body and speech, you can't control your mind. It's a fact. Then the next level, you go to the middle scope. The essence of that is understanding how delusions function, looking into the 3 poisons, looking into the attachment, the aversion, the jealousy, all the pain and suffering, and distinguishing them, discriminating, discerning, distinguishing between them and the positive ones. This is the miracle. This is being your own therapist. This is a really hard job, full-on job every day. And then using those techniques, like I said, either the story is so stormy, you can't control the thoughts, but at least you try not to believe them. Have one tiny part of your mind saying to you, it's okay, Robina, don't believe. It's all right, it'll pass. But not buying into the story, not getting involved in the story. This is intense. And not criticizing yourself. This is a big problem. You know, there's a big difference between having angry thoughts and then being angry. Let me use an example. Let's say I'm convinced that Fred is cheating on me, you know? So I go to see you, there's my friend Mary, and I go to see Mary, and I'm crying and raging on about Fred did this and Fred did that, and I'm getting angry. I'm getting angry, angrier and angry, and you're helping me get angry. Yeah, isn't he a creep? How did you put up with him, Robina? That's called getting angry. Now, the other way to see it is I go to see you and I'm feeling angry, but I don't want to be angry. I want to talk to you so you can help me work through it. And I'm crying and I'm feeling upset, talking about my boyfriend, but that's not being angry. That's having the angry thoughts, but the intention is to work with it to solve the problem. So don't be scared of your thoughts. Don't be scared of those thoughts arising, all those fearful, crazy thoughts. It's the dirt coming out. As Lama Zopa said to my friend, I always quote this, it's intense, serious meditator for years and years and years, my friend Roger, Australian monk, not Lama Zopa Roger, another one. Intense meditation retreats, 3-year retreats, 4-year retreats, out of his brain with extra levels of rage and anger and arrogance. He was really distressed and he went to Lama Zopa, and Rinpoche laughed and laughed and laughed and said, fantastic, the dirt has to come out. The dirt has to come out. The dirt has to come out. I can't stress this one enough. If you are practicing, and every one of you is seriously practicing, I know that, then don't be surprised the shit comes to the surface. It's like putting your clothes in a washing machine. Don't get upset when you see the dirt in the water. Be happy. Because the junk in our mind goes to very deep levels. And because you're consciously working on yourself, you inevitably are going to see it and taste it more powerfully. So that's where you have to distinguish between being angry and buying into the story, allowing the crazy angry thoughts to come, but not buying into them. This is a miracle of a difference. If we can be brave to do that, whereas we feel guilty and we try to suppress it and make it go away and think, oh, I'm bad. So you mustn't do that commentary. There's a huge difference between the crazy thoughts coming and buying into the crazy thoughts. You have to see the difference. If you can do the first one, you have a good sleep and they're gone by the next day. I promise. Suddenly you'll see reality again. You're blind for a while, you know. So be courageous. Doing this job of working on our mind is an intense job, and it's a miracle of a job. I mean, it's like, even to consider that you're trying to be a better human being on this planet, that's a pretty incredible job to do. I can't see that too many human beings are trying to do that. Some are. It's amazing to be happy about it, be glad. So be glad to see your shit, to be glad to see the rubbish mind, because now you're seeing what is causing you pain, and it's not at the core of your being. It doesn't define you, and you can change. That's the courage we have to have, I tell you. And that's why doing the 4 opponent powers at the end of every day is a miraculous practice, fantastic practice. So we're a work in progress. I love that saying. You're a work in progress, okay? So important to remember that. I'm going to cheat you of time. I'm going to leave soon. I think we've done enough, as always, because I always talk faster. So let's finish with a little meditation, okay? Just a little kind of, let's think, what should we do?
Venerable.
Yeah?
Mary Camille had her hand up.
Oh, yes, darling, talk to me.
Thank you.
Yes, Mary.
Venerable, thank you. This is such a powerful teaching today. I was going to ask if we could do the blessing of the speech.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay. I can screen share it.
So just screen share, just have the mantras there. So we can do a little, okay, we do this meditation. I love doing this meditation. Good, yeah, we can just, yeah, so put it up now, just have, yeah, just have it throw the, you just have to, I'll just lead you in the visualization. We'll do it quickly. I'll lead you in the visualization. Then you just got to read if you don't know the syllables. So let me explain this practice in case you don't know it. As I've been saying, you know, that's right here. Just go back a bit, yeah. Previous page. That's it, yeah. So you just have to open your, just stay there, stay there. So I'll just explain it. So just sit there and close your eyes and get comfortable, okay? Just close your eyes. And if you're sitting in a chair, don't slump into the chair. Sit upright, your feet on the ground, your hands in your lap relaxed, your head slightly forward, chin tucked in. And we'll just do a 3 minutes of concentration meditation first. So just what we're going to do, very simple technique. It's a simple technique. It's, you're going to just simply decide to pay attention to the sensation at your nose as you breathe in and out. It's a very simple thing. Don't make it complicated. You're not trying to make the thoughts go away. You're not trying to have a vision. You're not trying to feel better. You're not trying to relax. It's like a technical thing. You kind of watch the breath. You're going to pay attention to that sensation. Meanwhile, allow your thoughts to come and go. Just mind your own business. Let the thoughts do what they like, but you stay focused just on the breath with determination for 3 minutes. Just the breath. What should go in and what should go out. And let the thoughts be. They can do what they like. So now we just imagine Buddha above our crown. Just think of the enlightened energy above our crown. And now so I think you need to go down again. I forget the visualization, Mary, just go up a bit more. Thanks, darling. At the very top. Now the other way, forward to page 1. That's it. Yeah, that's right. So now go up a bit. Just go up a bit. Go down a bit. I mean, go a bit past. The other way. That's it. Stay there. Right there. Stop. Okay. So just stay focused, people. Concentrate. So now just imagine on your tongue. If you haven't done this before, it's so cute. It's so sweet. On your tongue, you imagine the Sanskrit syllable ah. Of course, if you don't know Sanskrit, you just see the Roman letter AH on your tongue, standing upright. Imagine. And then you imagine it turns into a moon disc, like a flat white cushion on your tongue. Just imagine. So now you imagine on top of the moon disc, there appears a white Om standing upright. Om. And now you imagine it's surrounded by all the vowels, all the Sanskrit vowels, all these Sanskrit sounds are said to be super powerful, holy sounds. I mean, we might have to believe that, but this is how they say. Okay, we're going to look into it. So all the vowels circling clockwise. Of course, we don't know them in Sanskrit, so just pretend. These, all these, we're going to say them in a minute. Circling the Om on our tongue, white vowels going clockwise. And then circling the white vowels are the red consonants going counterclockwise. And then surrounding them are the blue syllables of the dependent related heart mantra, as Rinpoche calls it. It's the syllables of the mantra of dependent arising, which is the method for realizing emptiness. Blue syllables going clockwise. So the white Om on the moon disc, surrounded by the white vowels going clockwise, surrounded by the red consonants going counterclockwise, surrounded by the blue dependent related heart mantra going clockwise, all on your tongue. Imagine. So now you imagine light of all the 3 colors goes out to all the 10 directions from these syllables, out to the 10 directions, north, south, east, west, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, and up and down, the 10 directions of the universe. And imagine it hooks the energy of the holy speech, the blessed speech, the powerful speech, the pure speech, the virtuous speech of all the holy beings, all the Buddhas, all the Bodhisattvas, all the great yogis, all the meditators, all even just good people. Hooks the energy of their powerful speech, their virtuous speech. And at all the syllables, the light comes back carrying that powerful blessed energy of this speech and absorbs into the syllables on our tongue, making them radiant and delicious and about to melt into nectar. The embodiment of all the holy, powerful speech of all the beings of the universe. Imagine. So now we're going to recite these syllables. And as we do the first lot, so you can open your eyes now and have a look, we're going to recite the vowels, and we're going to imagine white nectar pouring down and up from these vowels on our tongue, filling us completely and totally purifying all the pain and suffering of our bodies and all the harm, all the karmic imprints of all the harm we've ever done to sentient beings with our bodies since beginningless time. All these karmic imprints and all the pain and suffering of our bodies and all the harm we've done with our bodies, totally purified by this blissful white nectar filling us as we recite the vowels. Om, a, I, u, ri, li, e, o, ang, swaha. Om, a, I, u, ri, li, e, o, ang, swaha. Om, a, I, u, ri, li, e, o, ang, swaha. Full of this white nectar, totally purified the body. And now as you recite the consonants, the red consonants, the red nectar pours down and up and fills our body completely, and this time purifying all the nonsense of our speech. Maybe we don't go around killing and stealing and raping too many times, but look at our speech, uncontrolled speech, just rabbiting on about nothing, confusing people, speech that isn't true. Even if we don't think we're lying, we so often speculate. We're not confident we're speaking the truth, and we just confuse people. The harsh speech, abusing people, and of course the main one, talking badly about people behind their backs. All the politicians speaking badly, speaking angrily about people. We do it all the time. All of this negative speech that poisons us. Don't worry about who it harms. Look at what it does to us. Pollutes our mind, pollutes our bodies because of the sound. Sound is mantra. And then negative speech is also sound, and it's the wind energy, and it pollutes the mind. So here we're purifying all of this so happily, and all the karmic imprints from all the harm we've ever done with our speech since beginningless time to cause suffering sentient beings. Full of this red nectar, totally purifying as we say the mantras, as we say the syllables. Om, ka, ganga, cha, janya, ta, dana, ta, dana, pa, ba, ma, yada, lava, sha, haksa, swaha. Om, ka, ganga, cha, janya, ta, dana, ta, dana, pa, ba, ma, yada, lava, sha, haksa, swaha. Om, ka, ganga, cha, janya, ta, dana, ta, dana, pa, ba, ma, yada, lava, sha, haksa, swaha. Full of this red nectar, totally purified our speech. And now as you recite the syllables of the dependent related heart mantra, dependent arising, this mantra, we then imagine blue nectar filling us completely, pouring down from the neck, from the syllables, filling us completely, and this time purifying our mind, the source of all the problems. An ego grasping that believes in the intrinsic me, the attachment to get what that me wants, the aversion when it doesn't get what it wants, the panic attack of anger, depression, anxiety, all the worries and dramas, and all the other nonsense. The low self-esteem, the arrogance, the attachment to reputation, all this stuff that causes so much pain, annihilated, because it is not at the core of our being. This is the point. These do not have an intrinsic nature. They are not they're not an assessment of reality, so therefore can be removed from the mind. Imagine this blue nectar eradicating them completely. purifying all the delusions. Om ye dhamma hetu prabhava hetun te shantatagado eva datte shanchayo niroda evambadi mahashamanaye svaha. Om ye dhamma hetu prabhava hetun te shantatagato eva datte shanchayo niroda evambadi mahashamanaye svaha. Om ye dhamma hetu prabhava hetun te shantatagato eva datte shanchayo niroda evambadi mahashamanaye svaha. Totally full of the blue nectar. Delusion's gone. How amazing. So now we visualize all the blue mantra, the syllables dissolve into the red syllables on our tongue. The red syllables dissolve into the white ones. The white ones dissolve into the Om. The Om dissolves into the moon disk. And the moon disk turns into an Ah. And then the Ah turns into pink colored nectar and dissolves into our tongue, making it indestructible, powerful, capable only of saying virtuous things, only of saying wise things. This is the power of speech. This is the main gift of the Buddha, you know, speech. In our own lives, think of it. You know, in business, in your family, speech is everything. Saying the wrong speech, you make a mess, no one believes you, no one trusts you, people think you're being abusive. But positive speech is the most tremendous thing. Such that, and so now imagine your speech is powerful. You've perfected your speech such that now whatever you say can only be of benefit. Even just saying good morning, whoever hears you, their pain and their suffering is subdued. People trust your speech. People believe your speech. You can be useful. Then in your life, in your family, in your business, in your Buddhist center, now you can be beneficial. It's amazing. Don't underestimate. Power of speech. Imagine you've perfected it. Be so happy. And of course, the way to get the powerful speech is various ways. One is to be silent. Consciously be silent. The next one is to consciously refrain from negative speech. This is huge. And then to consciously say positive things, not just be Pollyanna, so you want people to like you. That's rubbish. And then your words will become powerful. And the more you say mantra, the more it purifies your speech. So what you do say becomes useful, becomes beneficial. And if you have, and especially like you're in business or in a Buddhist center or running things, and people respect your speech and people will do your wishes. Whatever you say will be achieved. This is huge. Be so delighted, full of this power of speech. And think, I'm going to watch my speech like a hawk, you know, every day. And just think, now we dedicate this sweet little prayer on the page there. May my tongue have all the courage of the ones gone to bliss. By the power manifesting from these glorified words, may all sentient beings be subdued. May whatever words I say, may all these actions be accomplished instantly. Okay, relax now. Thank you, Mary. I love that little practice because it's so surprising, isn't it? I mean, who would ever think you do a meditation on speech? So sweet. Okay, people, time to go home. Thank you, darlings. Gone like a dream. Yes, yes, Lorna.
Hi, sorry, I've just been thinking about this, but I thought since we have
Good.
the time
Come on
before you
then.
leave.
Yes,
I struggle also with the distressing thoughts and feelings about what's going on in the world.
Yes.
And how it just never seems to get much better. And I'm just wondering what kind of practice
Lorna. This is
do around subduing the thoughts and feelings around.
Okay, Lorna, this is the point. the more we understand karma, this is the point now, the more we understand karma, isn't it? The more we know why it's happening. So one of the first things you apply, this is what the Lamrim means. When you see the suffering in the world, what happens with us now, and it's inevitable, we get distressed, don't we? And then, as you said, we want it to end. So we try to do the analysis. First of all, that's attachment talking. I mean, it sounds very brutal, but we have to be this analysis. Attachment only wants lovely things. So we want to look out into the world and we only want to see nice things. We only want to see happiness. We only want to see, and that's nothing wrong with that. Wanting happiness is good. But what if we see suffering? So one, you apply the logic of karma. And then what will happen is you will have such compassion. You see, normally the analysis is look at the poor Ukrainians and look at the wicked Russians. I mean, it's an example right now, isn't it? Every year it's another story. 1 minute it's hate Mr. Trump and love this person. Hate this person and love that person. That's the endless dualistic view we have of the world. So if we're trying to apply the Buddhist analysis, we see it, and it's just the karma of these people who set themselves up for this suffering 40,000 lives ago, if you like. So when we know that this is what's happening, we will then, the first learning is, oh my God, look at the result of anger. Look at the result of violence. Look at the result of killing. And then you say, that tells me that I'm going to stop killing. I'm going to stop lying. So that first one is it reiterates your strength to live in your vows and never harm again, because you know you don't want that suffering. Then the next one is compassion. Next is compassion. And then you think, like the Bodhisattva, what can I do to help? Now, you know there's almost nothing you can do. Go to Ukraine if you can. Send $20 million if you can. But what if you can't? And mostly we can't. So then you think, I will never give up working on myself so I do become a Buddha eventually. So that becomes grist for the mill to strengthen your compassion, to never give up, working on your mind second by second, and help the ant in front of you, help the next door neighbor in front of you, help the ex-husband in front of you, do what you can in front of you. Then by doing something and knowing you can never give up, then you get some courage. That's the approach. That's applying all the components of the path to it. And you just keep going.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for asking. Thank you for asking. It's so important. Okay, dearest, time to go home. Thank you so much. Thank you, Venerable Dundrup. Thank you, everybody. We better do a little prayer to finish then. Okay, let's do that. Who's going to sing the prayer? Someone going to sing the prayer? Or do you want me to sing it, Dundrup?
This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. May my Venerable Lama's life be firm, his white divine actions spread in the 10 directions. May the torch of the teachings of Losang always remain, dispelling the darkness of all beings in the 3 realms.
We imagine Buddha delightedly accepting our offering, accepting the mandala that Venerable Dundrup's offering.
Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniryatsaya.
Thank you so much. And then we just think, due to the virtuous karmic seeds that we have planted in our minds from listening to these teachings, may we quickly attain the state of the Buddha, just like our own spiritual teacher, our own mentor, the Guru Buddha, in other words, and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. Think like that. And the next one, another one maybe. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta, so bodhicitta is this amazing aspiration, like I just said to Lorna, to never give up, never give up, never give up. That has not arisen in the minds of others, may it arise and grow, and that which has arisen, may it not diminish, but increase more and more. So then just think also, no more prayers, that's good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So just think also, I like to say it in ordinary words, if we have any spiritual mentors ourselves, the Dalai Lama, Lama Rinpoche, whoever we have, all the people in the world whom we rely upon, if we're Buddhists, rely upon as the Buddha for us, our own spiritual mentors, may that we think strongly, may they live long, may they live long, may they live long, because the world needs them badly. And then may we live a long life. If we're doing even a tiny bit to help sentient beings, may we never give up and may we live a long life so we can be of benefit to others. That's it, I think. Thank you, Venerable Dundrup. Thank you, all you kind people. And I'm off to New York tomorrow, but I'll still be the same. I have my picture behind me. You can't tell the difference. And I'll see you. I've got something scheduled, I think, for this week, a month. I'm not sure. I haven't identified. So I'll see you all again. Thank you, darling people. All of you so kind, so kind. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Much love and goodbye. Thank you very much. Bye, people.